Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. This show is brought to you by Audible.com. You go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. You go there, you sign up for free, you get yourself a free audiobook. Tonight we are live on TalkStreamLive.com, PSN Radio, Wolf Spirit Radio, TalkSuperstation.com, AwakeRadio.us, AwakeRadio.uk, 1800 online, Shizaz Radio, Just Us Radio Network, and Scottish Sovereigns on the Land. Okay, then throughout the week, we're on Para X Radio, Saturday nights, 7 p.m., the CBS station. Penny Entertainment on Blog Talk Radio, Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Firehorse Radio, Thursday evenings. A Late Night in the Midlands on Tuesdays. And High Point Radio, both AM and FM, New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania. And we just started out on FPRN Radio every day, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Coming up soon, we're going to be hooking up on Cave Radio Broadcasting and Northern Lights Radio, so we're still working on that. Tonight we have Nick Bryant. He's the author of The Franklin Scandal and Confessions of a D.C. Madam. Okay, and you can find his books. I got the link to his books up on my blog, The Opperman Report. Otherwise, you can find the books on trineday.com or on his website, franklinscandal.com. Coming up in the next few weeks, we got Dean Henderson talking about Venezuela and the death of Hugo Chavez. We have John Morgan talking about the Princess Diana murders. And we have some very special broadcasts that we're going to be doing during the week that we're going to be recording. We have something coming up about Ted Gunderson. Also, the 1979 San Diego school shooting that inspired the song I Don't Like Mondays. We have a show coming up about some prison correspondence with Drew Peterson and Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. So a lot of really good stuff coming up that we're going to be recording and producing and keeping sort of in the background. Now, don't forget, the show is listener-sponsored. You can donate at oppermanreport@gmail.com. And so to keep us going. And you can also find the shows on the Opperman Report YouTube channel, Spreaker.com, and iHeartRadio.com. So tonight we're here with Nick Bryant, the author of the DC, what is that called again? It's called Confessions of a DC Madam?
Confessions of a D.C. Madam, yes, and also the Franklin Scandal, a story of power brokers, child abuse, and betrayal.
Now, right, now a lot of people hear this, they say the Confessions of a D.C. Madam. Is it the same D.C. Madam as the one that everyone's familiar with? But this is a different one. So why don't you give us an idea what's going on with this D.C. Madam? It's a gay...
Okay,
yeah.
Confessions of a D.C. Madam, the politics of sex, lies, and blackmail, is about Henry Vinson. He ran the largest gay escort service that's ever been uncovered in Washington, D.C. Deborah Jean Palfrey was his heir apparent. She was dubbed the D.C. Madam in 2008. Henry was packed away and sent off to prison in 1990, and Deborah Jean Palfrey was dubbed the D.C. Madam 18 years later.
Oh, so they knew each other.
Henry Vinson ran the largest gay escort service in Washington, D.C., and his ultimate downfall was precipitated by the fact that he provided escorts to a CIA asset named Craig Spence, who used his escorts to blackmail politicians and other power brokers. And Henry suddenly found himself at the epicenter of a sprawling conspiracy whose cover-up was engineered at the pinnacle of the Bush 1 administration.
So the two D.C. Madams knew each other.
They did not, no. Henry Vinson never met Deborah Jean Palfrey.
Okay.
Henry was packed away to prison in 1990. He got out in 1995 and became a legitimate businessman at that point. Got out of the escort business. He's been a very successful, legitimate businessman since 1995.
Well, how'd you meet him to begin with?
Well, when I was writing the Franklin Scandal, the Franklin Scandal was about an interstate pedophile network that flew kids from coast to coast and pandered them to the rich and powerful. And Lawrence C. King, who was one of the ringleaders of the pedophile network, worked in conjunction with Craig Spence, who was, as I mentioned earlier, a D.C. power broker and a CIA asset. And Craig Spence and King had a pedophilic blackmail business together. And Spence's house was wired for audiovisual blackmail. And king would bring kids in to Washington, D.C., and politicians and power brokers that were pedophilically inclined would party at Spence's house and be provided with whatever they wanted, and ultimately be blackmailed. And Henry dealt with Craig Spence because Craig Spence spent up to $20,000 a month on escorts from his escort service. Craig Spence would provide D.C. elites with whatever they wanted. If they wanted young men in their 20s, they wanted young women in their 20s, or if they wanted children. I mean, whatever you wanted as far as sexual proclivities or drugs, Craig Spence would provide, and he would, at that point, he would be blackmailed.
Okay, and Craig Spence, though, had some pretty legitimate positions, though, in government, right? He was a Republican lobbyist.
Craig Spence was a Republican lobbyist, and but he was very shadowy. I mean, it is true that he did lobby. He lobbied for the healthcare industry, but the vast majority of his money came through illicit activities such as blackmailing. And actually, he was protected by. He had like his own Secret Service crew, his own Praetorian Guard that protected him. And because if you're blackmailing the rich and the powerful,
yeah.
The rich and the powerful have access to people that can probably assassinate you. So if you're blackmailing the rich and the powerful, you have to have a lot of power behind you to ensure that you're as your life insurance policy. And a cadre of Secret Service agents acted as Spence's Praetorian Guard.
Wait a second. He had actual Secret Service agents working off duty for him?
Yes. Henry and I get into that in Confessions of a D.C. Madam. He actually had Secret Service agents guarding him.
Okay, on duty or off duty?
I would assume off duty, but the way that setup was, one would never really know, to tell you the truth.
Okay, wow.
Okay. There were a lot of rules bent with Craig Spence. I mean, he would give midnight tours of the White House to prostitutes and male prostitutes and child prostitutes. I mean, Spence was able to bend a lot of rules in the Reagan and Bush 1 administration.
Well, give me an idea. When was Spence around Washington doing his stuff?
In the 80s, throughout the 80s.
So under Bush?
Under Reagan and Bush.
Under Reagan and Bush.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And he wound up murdered.
Well, actually, he wound up committing suicide.
Okay.
And the internet is rife with speculation that he, in fact, was murdered. But I think Craig Spence, the shadowy organization that he worked for, retracted its financing. He lost his bodyguards. And he also had AIDS. He was a crack addict. He was a pedophile. And he had AIDS. And I think that the deal was, Craig, you've got to take your life or else, we're going to have to do it for you. So I think that Craig Spence did ultimately commit suicide. And Henry knew Craig Spence fairly well. I mean, didn't like him, had to deal with him. Craig Spence spent $20,000 a month on escorts from Henry's escort service. And Henry also believes that Craig Spence committed suicide, that he was given an either or, and he decided to take his own life rather than have his life taken for him.
Okay. Well, so now Henry Vinson, it is, right?
Yes.
Okay, now he's a D.C. madam. Now, how did he get involved in becoming a D.C. madam and winding up in Washington? It's pretty high-level stuff. How did he get involved in that?
Now, that is kind of a comedy of errors that even Henry is. Confessions of a D.C. Madam is a very interesting book. And Henry was a mortician he grew up in a remote corner of West Virginia. And he was a gay kid, and he got picked on quite a bit. And ultimately, he decided that he would be a mortician. He'd become a mortician. and he sought his mortuary fortunes in Washington, D.C. And he started to hang out with a couple of other gay morticians. And Henry lived a really pristine life. I mean, he did his first sexual encounter until he was 21, and never really a drinker, never a drugger, just really, he was kind of a mild-mannered mortician, a gay mild-mannered mortician. And he was hanging out with some other gay morticians, and they took him to a club called Shooters. And Shooters was a gay exotic club, and where there'd be gay exotic dancers. And Henry met a gay exotic dancer who he kind of became enamored with, and invited the guy out for a date. And then during the course of their dinner, this gay exotic dancer told Henry that he was also an escort. And Henry's 26 years old. Now, he had lived a very sheltered life. He had never met an escort before. I mean, that's how sheltered his life had been. And this dancer / escort was telling Henry how difficult it is to work for a solid escort service, because escort services are always fly-by-night, and they're always problematic. And then he told Henry that there was an escort service for sale, that someone who owned this gay escort service was dying of AIDS, and that he wanted to unload it for like $10,000. So Henry just kind of jumped. It was just kind of the impetuousness of youth. He just kind of, I think because his sexuality had been so repressed for so long, I think that might have been a variable in the equation. But he became a proprietor of a gay escort service literally overnight. And what happened with Henry is very, very smart. So most escort services are fly-by-night operations, and they don't pay their phone bill. So Henry called up the DC, all the escort services in the DC Yellow Pages, and he noticed that a number of the numbers were disconnected. And so he called up these numbers, noticed that the phones were disconnected, and then he called up the phone company, said that he would pay the arrears on the number if the phone company gave him the number. So suddenly he ended up with like a bunch of numbers in the DC Yellow Pages under escort services. He exponentially enlarged his business in 2 weeks.
You want to know what? Here, because I told you I was here in Vegas, right? When I first moved here, when I first moved here to Vegas, there was a big scandal because what happened is the few organized crime guys who ran the escort services, they had a source at the phone company that could forward other escort companies' phone calls to their escort company. Yeah, so it's. I wonder if Henry knew something about that, or he just thought it on his own. You think?
Henry had no connections to organized crime.
Okay.
He has, like I said, he was a mortician. I mean, and he just had a lot of ingenuity. And he just grew his escort until it became the largest escort service in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so now we set up, how did it become, because he took everybody else's phone numbers, but how did he get hooked up with all these politicians and stuff?
Well, what happened there was, and the Shooters, the guy who introduced him, the dancer / escort that introduced him to the guy who was selling the escort service, that Henry found out that most of his friends and most of the guys that worked at this exotic dance bar were also escorts. So Henry just had an instant pool of employees. And he ran it very much like a business, and he treated the escorts well. He paid them fairly, and he was very businesslike in his running of the escort service. So it just grew exponentially. And he was in Washington, D.C., and there are going to be people, gay people, that are going to be soliciting escorts in Washington, D.C., and because it's Washington, D.C., a number of them just happen to be politicians and power brokers. Now, where Henry really regrets is the day that Craig Spence called him.
Okay.
Craig Spence was the power broker CIA asset whose house was wired for audiovisual blackmail. And Spence started calling Henry every day and started spending up to $20,000 a month on escorts. And Henry didn't really like Spence, but he was spending up to $20,000 a month.
Yeah, you like anybody for $20,000 a month. Okay, I can get along with a lot of people. But now Spence was doing this for sex for himself, or he's using this for other people, like as a broker.
All the above.
Okay.
Spence hosted orgies. Spence would provide any of his power broker cronies with anything they wanted, and so he spent $20,000 a month. Now, when Henry, the second time he met Craig Spence, and this is kind of an interesting story. The second time he met Craig Spence, Spence was sitting on his couch along with Lawrence E. King, who ran the pedophile network that I talk about in the Franklin scandal.
Right.
And these two guys have like seismic narcissism, Craig Spence and Lawrence E. King. I mean, just seismic narcissism. I mean, all they can really do is talk about themselves. And they were pumping themselves up like parade balloons. And then all of a sudden, Craig Spence just starts asking Henry some sincere, heartfelt questions about his life. And Henry is really baffled by this because he thinks that Craig Spence is an individual that only acts for some kind of selfish utilitarian reason. So Henry thinks that he's witnessed like something tantamount to the parting of the Red Sea because Craig Spence seems to be taking an interest in his life. He's asking Henry where he grew up and where he went to college, and then he starts asking Henry about his escort service. And Henry started talking about his escort service and how many escorts he employs and where he employs them, and then all of a sudden, after about 15 minutes of this Q&A, Craig Spence stands up and walks. They're in Craig Spence's living room. He walks to a closet, and he opens the closet and he signals Henry, and then there's a hidden panel in the closet that he opens, and he signals Henry, and Henry walks into this hidden room that's behind this two-way mirror, and there's a camera on a tripod pointed out the living room, so you could through the two-way mirror. But then there's a whole wall of monitors. And then Spence hits a couple of buttons, and then all of a sudden Henry sees himself talking about his escort service.
Right.
And Craig Spence says, "I blackmail people for a living, and consider yourself blackmailed." So that was Henry's second meeting with Craig Spence.
Okay, now let me ask you a question about that, okay? Because now, I'm a private investigator, right? So I'm very familiar with blackmail and people being blackmailed and stuff like that. And it's hard to pull off, because you can try and blackmail someone and you can easily get arrested. Now, Larry King and this guy Craig Spence, like they were physically big enough, they were by themselves in it, that they could intimidate Henry, that they couldn't just, start scuffling right there?
Henry is a very he's kind of short and very thin.
Okay.
And he's easy to intimidate. But as I said before, Craig Spence had a Praetorian Guard of Secret Service agents that protected him.
So he had them there with him at the time.
What's that?
So he had these.
They were at his house 24/7.
Okay.
By Secret Service 24/7. Yeah.
Hey, were you ever able to track down the names of the Secret Service agents? Were you ever able to track down the specific Secret Service agents that were involved in this?
No, I never. Well, I know of a couple, but they weren't really willing to talk.
Okay.
But there were some other people involved with Spence that were really dangerous too, and we'll get into those people in Confessions of a DC Madam. And Henry, unfortunately, King and Spence pressured Henry to provide him with children, and he just wouldn't do that. And he was fine with sex between consenting adults, but he would not provide King and Spence with children. And at a certain point, after King and Spence had repeatedly pressured him to provide him with children, Henry just walked away from Spence and decided not to deal with him anymore. Now, Henry had met another individual that was in mesh with Spence, whose name, and Henry doesn't know his last name. He just knew his name as Tony. And Craig Spence had said that Tony was a CIA asset, much like Craig Spence was. And Tony hung out with a couple of big brutes, and I think he did a lot of Spence's really dirty work, because Henry decided to quit dealing with Spence, and Spence sent Tony over to Henry's place and to discharge guns at night, and ultimately they broke into his house and smashed it up and beat up Henry and, said, you're going to deal with Spence or else we're going to kill you. So it got to be being a DC madam got to be pretty rough for Henry.
Okay, let's go over this. Now, Henry he's a homosexual himself, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he has a little escort business. Okay, fine. He's blurring the lines there. He hooks up with this guy, Craig Spence. He starts getting blackmailed. Now, did he still get paid by Spence even after the blackmail started, or from then on it was free?
No. Spence was paying up to $20,000 a month.
Right.
He was always paying Henry.
Oh, so even after the blackmail, he was still paying him.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing about it is, Spence was into a lot of illegal activities, which Henry knew about, primarily the blackmail and running a interstate pedophile network. So that, in and of itself, because Henry was blackmailed, he kept his mouth shut about that, which I think kind of bothered him a bit. But Spence did pay him, yes.
Okay.
I mean, Spence was getting hookers from Henry just about every day. As I said, he was racking up $20,000 a month. And,
okay.
And that's corroborated, too, by the Washington Times.
And also, too, Henry must have been making money from other clients as well.
Oh, Henry was making a ton of money. Henry
Okay.
ran the biggest escort service in Washington, D.C., and, he was rolling in dough.
Yeah, that's a huge business,
He's a very bright guy, a very good marketer, and he started with that one escort service, and then he did the Yellow Pages thing, and then it just grew exponentially.
Okay, so now Spence starts blackmailing him and says, hey, we want little boys and little girls too, or just little boys?
He wanted children, but Henry just refused to do that.
So Henry never did that, or he did succumb?
He never did it.
Okay,
Never.
okay.
He refused to do that, and that's where he started to get into a chasm with Spence and the people that were behind Spence.
Okay, so Spence sent some guy over to start shooting up his house and stuff and causing problems.
Yes.
Yeah, then what?
Well, Henry decided that he'd still deal with Craig Spence after that. And although Spence never pressured him for children, Henry continued to deal with him. And Craig Spence is graduated from snorting cocaine to smoking crack at this point, so he became kind of a lunatic, and he was very difficult to deal with. And he worked for the shadowy network that protected him and obviously paid for his lavish lifestyle. And at a certain point, that network rescinded its funding because Craig Spence had to sell his place. He had a very nice home in an upscale part of Washington, D.C., and he had to sell his place, and ultimately the Secret Service agents that were protecting him no longer protected him. So at a certain point, I think Craig Spence got too dysfunctional
Right.
to be the point man for this blackmail operation. So that shady network that he was working for, that I believe was CIA affiliated, ultimately rescinded its financing.
Now you said that Spence was hooked up with the CIA. Now what did that involve?
Well, Craig Spence was a CIA asset.
Okay.
It's been corroborated by Craig Spence told that to Henry. Craig Spence told that to Washington Times reporters, and Washington Times reporters corroborated it through their intelligence connections that Craig Spence wasn't a direct employee of the CIA, but he was a CIA asset.
So somehow he was being used by the CIA for something, but we don't know what his duties were for the CIA.
Well, his duties were blackmailing people.
Right. Because
that's what he was doing.
Right.
I mean, as I said earlier, he was blackmailing some of the most powerful men in the country. And you don't blackmail the most powerful men in the country unless you've got like an army behind you.
No, I hear you.
Because
yeah.
because some of these powerful men have their own armies. So you've got to have a massive army if you're going to blackmail people.
Okay, so now if he's working for CIA, the people he must have been blackmailing must have been like foreign people, right? Foreign governments, foreign, politicians and stuff.
America, foreign governments, politicians too. I believe that American politicians were certainly in that mix.
Okay, do we have any idea of any names of who he was blackmailing?
Well, we don't have names of who he was blackmailing, but we do talk about names in Henry's book.
Okay.
And the thing about it is, with Henry wasn't there when Spence was blackmailing people, but the thing about it is, this shadowy network that provided Spence with his blackmail abilities and blackmail technology and protected him, they were obviously blackmailing everybody that they possibly could, because they knew exactly who called Henry. I mean, any politician or power broker that called Henry, they knew exactly who Henry was providing escorts to, because they tapped his phone. So this shadowy network was not only probably, well, they were certainly blackmailing people through Spence's house, but they also, I believe, were cognizant of who Henry was sending gay escorts to, and they were probably blackmailing those people too.
Gotcha. Now, were these legal wiretaps on Henry's phones?
No, they were not.
How does Henry know he was being wiretapped?
Because there was a box truck right outside his apartment, and guys with suits would go in and out of it occasionally.
I know, because they didn't care if he knew or not. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a giveaway.
Yeah. Okay, I can totally see that. Okay, now, so then what's the next big event? Henry gets busted, or?
Well, what happens is, Henry's providing escorts to a lot of big shots, like William Casey, the head of the CIA.
Really? Wait! Casey was dating boys?
Yeah, he was getting he wanted underage boys, but Henry provided him with young men.
Really? Okay. So Casey was having sex with men. Okay.
Yes.
According to Henry.
And he had a strange ritual. He liked according to Henry, Casey liked these escorts to anoint him with various oils.
Really?
And yes, and he also had erectile dysfunction. So that's how William Casey was brought to Henry's attention, because his escorts would talk about this kind of abnormal gentleman who wanted to be anointed with oils and had erectile dysfunction.
Okay, then let me ask you this. Now Henry's a smart guy.
Yes.
Why? And once you hear the name, okay, listen, I'm involved in crime. And now the name William Casey, the CIA director, is brought to my attention. I'm going to get the hell out of this business and get the hell out of town.
Well, Henry was young.
Okay.
And he had the hubris and naivete of youth.
I hear you.
And when you're young, I mean, a lot of people, when they're young, they don't think that the laws of physics apply to them.
I hear you.
And,
okay. Good answer.
And Henry just had that hubris that ultimately would be his downfall.
Right. Okay. So then, what other big names can you talk about?
There was Larry Craig, Reagan's chief of personnel, chief of personnel Charles Dutcher.
Wait a second. Larry Craig was the guy that was tapping his foot in the bathroom?
Yes.
Okay, Larry Craig. Okay.
And Barney Frank, and there were others, Alan Barron.
Well, Barney Frank, you expect it, but Barney Frank, didn't he live with his own? He had his own guy there, right? He had a guy.
Actually, the guy that he lived with was one of Henry's escorts. Frank Joby.
So that whole wait a second.
One of the escorts that Henry employed.
So that whole big scandal where Barney Frank got caught living with a guy that was an escort and running an escort service, that was all connected to Henry's story.
That's all connected to Henry's story. Yeah.
Oh, see, okay, good. Now that's all documented. We know that. Okay, that's interesting. Oh boy.
Actually, a lot of Henry's story is documented.
No, yeah,
his Craig Spence spending $20,000 a month on escorts is documented. Craig Spence is documented by the Washington Times. Craig Spence having blackmail equipment in his house is documented by the Washington Times, heavily corroborated by that. Craig Spence being a CIA asset, heavily corroborated by the Washington Times. So there's a lot of Henry's story that is heavily corroborated by the Washington Times. And the thing about it is, the Washington Post covered it all up.
Really?
Yes.
Well, was Henry working with any clients that maybe worked at the Washington Post, and then maybe that's the reason?
No, the Washington Post has a long history of affiliation with the Central Intelligence Agency.
Okay.
A lot of people don't really understand that about the Washington Post, but the Washington Post has a long history of working with the CIA. When the Central Intelligence Agency initiated Operation Mockingbird, which was its plan to infiltrate the media, the first person in the media that they contacted was Donald Graham, who was the publisher of the Washington Post. And Donald Graham acted as the CIA's point man in the media to infiltrate other media. And Donald Graham also stocked the Washington Post with a lot of intelligence individuals, including Ben Bradley. Ben
Really?
Bradley was definitely working for the CIA in the 1950s. The salty editor that supposedly spurred Woodward and Bernstein on to topple Nixon, he was also responsible for covering up Henry's and Spence's. Actually, he was responsible for covering up Spence's CIA blackmail and all that other stuff that we've been talking about.
Gotcha.
So the Washington Times was breaking all these stories that were pretty amazing. I mean, they'd be nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for these stories. And they were coming out with all these stories, and then the Washington Post was coming out with all these stories deriding the Washington Times stories, saying that they're delusional and that they're sensational. And of course, we saw this happen with Gary Webb.
Right.
The New York Times and the LA Times just jumped right on the Washington Post bandwagon to kick the lowly Washington Times to the curb. And what's kind of ironic is the Washington Times at the time was owned by the Reverend Moon, and it was providing Americans with accounts of how their political system was being hijacked. And the Washington Post really, you've got to really read the book to really understand how assiduously the Washington Post worked at covering up what the Washington Times was trying to break open.
Okay, can you name some other names?
Well, here's an interesting one, and this is the one that got Henry into a lot of trouble. Do you know who Donald Gregg is?
No, I don't.
You don't know who Donald Gregg is? Okay, Donald Gregg was a CIA agent for 31 years. Played an integral role in the Phoenix program, a nefarious CIA initiative that slaughtered over 20,000 South Vietnamese who were in many cases mistakenly thought to be collaborating with North Vietnam. And he was also the National Security Advisor for George Herbert Walker Bush, Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush. And he was one of the principal architects of Iran-Contra. And he was, when George Herbert Walker Bush ascended to the presidency, he appointed his good friend Donald Gregg to be the ambassador to South Korea.
Okay.
So here's where it gets interesting. Donald Gregg is gay, and he is racking up all kinds of charges on his government MasterCard. Now, this story has a comedic element to a certain degree, because Henry met a mortician who helped him run credit cards, and they set up a merchant account that was ostensibly for funeral accessories.
Brother.
So if you ran a credit card through Henry's escort service, you would be paying for embalming or cremation or a casket or something like that. So Donald Gregg has got his government-issued MasterCard, and he's racking up all these funeral accessories because he's getting all these gay escorts from Henry. So a government accounting office official calls Henry and asks him, why is Donald Gregg racking up so many funeral accessories on your MasterCard merchant account? And Henry said, well, that's something that's very personal. I suggest that you discuss it with Donald Gregg. So after the government accounting office contacted Henry, Henry called up Craig Spence because he knew that Spence and Donald Gregg had some kind of affiliation. He goes, I just got a call from the government accounting office. And they want to know why Donald Gregg is racking up all these funeral accessories. And I told them to talk to Mr. Gregg because it was a highly personal matter. So what happened there was Spence had Henry come to his condominium because he'd sold his house at this point. And Spence was there, and then someone in George Herbert Walker Bush's cabinet was there. And they wanted Henry to go to bat for Donald Gregg. But Henry wasn't willing to do that because they thought that he was getting set up by them for a government accounting through government embezzlement. So Henry wouldn't do it. And this member of George Herbert Walker Bush's cabinet said, I can withstand a background check. Can you, as a threat? And Henry's hubris, he was only 29 at this time, said, yes, I can withstand a background check. And then within 72 hours, Henry was raided by the Secret Service.
Oh, real? Oh, whoa, wait a second. Wait, the arrest for his prostitution ring was by the Secret Service?
What's that?
You're saying that his prostitution operation, his escort service, the arrest was made by the Secret Service?
Yes. And what happened, now this is an interesting story because Henry, I said earlier that there was an individual named Tony that threatened Henry.
Okay,
Tony worked with Spence, and he was the shadowy figure that wafted in and out of Henry's life. And Tony asked Henry to start running credit cards. Because initially, before Henry met Tony, he didn't have an ability to run credit cards. But Tony made sure that he found an ability to run credit cards. And so Henry set up a merchant account. And then Tony suggested a place in Florida to run credit cards, which turned out to be a Secret Service thing.
Oh, brother.
So what they were doing, Henry was the man who knew too much. Henry knew about that Craig Spence was blackmailing all these very powerful people. He knew that Craig Spence was affiliated with the CIA. He knew that William Casey was using his escorts. He knew that Donald Gregg was using his escorts. He knew that Larry Craig was using his escorts. Henry was the man who knew too much.
Yeah.
And they had him do the credit cards because at that time, credit card fraud was handled by the Secret Service.
Right, it makes sense now, yeah.
So he was like a lamb led to slaughter because the Secret Service could completely control that investigation when they decided that the time was right to take Henry down. So they led him down the primrose path of processing credit cards, knowing that there would ultimately be a time when they would probably need to take him down just because he knew too much. And then the Secret Service could control that entire investigation.
I got you.
That's what happened. That's what happened to Henry.
Okay, now what was he charged with when they busted him?
Now this is where it gets really ominous for Henry, anyway. Henry was charged with a 43-count RICO indictment, which you're familiar with RICO.
Oh, yeah.
Racketeering, influence, corrupt. Okay, so mob bosses, they don't get, a mob boss will get charged with like a 30-count RICO indictment or a 35-count RICO indictment. Henry was running an escort service, and he was charged with a 43-count RICO indictment. he was looking at 295 years in prison. I mean, he was only running an escort service. And that was the government's grand plan. They wanted to make sure that he didn't talk. So they essentially said to him, yes, you know a lot, and you could cause us a lot of problems, but if you talk, we will put you away for the rest of your life. So he decided that he would take the plea bargain. I mean, Greta Van Susteren represented him.
Yeah, I know. We'll get into that in a second. But now the thing is, too, now, when he's negotiating his plea, he doesn't have anybody to rat out because they don't want to hear about anybody he wants to talk about.
Well, actually, they debriefed him for a number of days, and he told them everything. And this is amazing. Greta Van Susteren was representing him.
Yeah.
And they were debriefing him, and he was saying all kinds of incriminating stuff about him, and naming various politicians and escorts, and a member of George Herbert Walker Bush's cabinet. I mean, he was giving them everything, and Greta, but he was heavily incriminating himself, and Greta Van Susteren didn't go to any of those debriefings.
Oh my God! Wait, was this what's called like a free talk? He was having a free talk where he couldn't be charged with any of those things he was talking about?
No, well, I mean, they had yet to give him any kind of. I mean, he was cooperating at that point, and they could decide. I mean, but just because you're cooperating, that doesn't mean that they're going to knock off years. I mean, you're working in the direction of knocking of leniency, but that doesn't necessarily mean leniency.
How did he hire Greta? How did he hire Greta Van Susteren?
His mother had heard about Greta Van Susteren, and she suggested that he hire Greta, and I think Henry would have regrets that very much. Now,
this was before OJ?
This was before Greta really became big.
Okay.
This was in 1989-90.
Right, that's before OJ. Okay, good. Okay.
Before the juice.
Yeah, that's before the white Bronco chase, okay? Oh, my God. Okay, so now he hires Greta Van Susteren. She does not attend any of these talks with the DA's office and with the... who was interrogating him? The Secret Service?
The Secret Service. The Secret Service controlled the entire investigation of Henry.
Wow. Okay, so then what happened? He goes in there, he's telling them everything.
Spills his guts, and then they ultimately say, well, Henry, we're going to give you 5 years.
Okay.
And he goes and he does his 5 years.
And Greta was his lawyer from start to finish?
Yes.
Okay, and he got a 5-year...
And he did, he had to go to prison for 5 years.
All right. How'd that work out?
Well, he got out of prison, and he got a master's degree in integrated marketing, and became a very successful businessman, legitimate businessman.
So he got out of prison about 35 years old?
What's that?
He got out of prison about 35 years old?
Yes.
Okay.
And got a master's degree in integrated marketing. And Henry is also a licensed pilot and licensed helicopter operator too.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So he's a very talented guy, and he became a very successful businessman. But the government came after him again, and Henry was the man who knew too much, and the government came after him again. On trumped-up IRS charges, which we talk about in the book, and threatened to indict his elderly mother.
Oh, really?
And yes, and then he had to eat some more time, and he's been out now for I don't know, about 8 years. He's a hugely successful, completely legitimate businessman.
Okay, and now with the IRS, right now, what happened with that? The IRS first. The IRS sends you a letter saying, "Hey, you owe us money." Okay.
No, that's not how it went.
You
kind of have to read the book. There's some, major nuances to how they nailed him on conspiracy to defraud the IRS, and he was the only one named. So it was kind of it was a very strange conspiracy indeed.
Well, how much money are we talking about?
Not that much. It was what happened was Henry Henry had gotten too credible. This is my take on it.
Yeah.
Why they came after him a second. And actually, they came after him a third time while we were writing this book.
I believe
there
it.
was a grand jury that was out to indict him while we were writing this book. But the second time around, I think he just become too successful and too legitimate.
Right.
And that gave him a lot of credibility, and he was the man who still knew too much. So I think that the government decided to take him down again, just to diminish his credibility and also to show him that they could take him down anytime they wanted.
Right. But wait, no, but the IRS charges, that was for the escort service, or that was later on?
No, this was later on.
Oh, okay. Now that's even worse because he couldn't have been making that much money. He had to be, you know, it had to be like a tax.
The second time they went after him is really ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would suggest that your listeners get the book if
Yeah.
they really want to understand that, because it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah,
And,
Confessions of a DC Madam. Yeah, because that's really, you know, it's really the IRS. You can work with them, you can negotiate with them, you can make payment plans.
not in Henry's.
Not Henry, though. Not Henry. Henry's a special case.
They wanted to put Henry away again,
Yeah.
and they succeeded.
Yeah, and then a third time, you're saying when you're writing the book, they came after him again for what kind of charges now?
We don't even know, but there was unfortunately, when we were writing the book, a grand jury was formed, and Henry hasn't had a lot of luck with grand juries.
Yeah,
so
sure.
He was a little nervous. And then he and his lawyer received a letter. This is a very strange letter from the U.S. Attorney for the District of Southern West Virginia. And the U.S. Attorney said that Henry owned about a building in West Virginia that was worth about $1 million. And the U.S. Attorney said to Henry, we would like to put out a press release that you gave us the building. And Henry's lawyer fired back, well, I mean, you've got to give us something else in return. I mean, Henry's just not going to give you $1 million building. I mean, you've got to give us, something in return. So Henry's attorney got a lawyer from the office of the Assistant U.S. Attorney for Southern West Virginia that said that they weren't going to indict Henry. And then, so Henry gave them the building, and then he got a letter saying that they weren't going to indict him. That's American justice a la Henry Vinson.
Wow. Now what would motivate him then to write this book and keep poking? I think I'd be out of the country by now.
Well, I think, the thing about it is Henry has gotten a lot of bad press.
Okay.
The government has really made Henry out to be like evil incarnate, and he's a pretty mild mannered guy, very laid back, and he's gotten a lot of bad press. The Washington Post just skewered him when he was going away on the income tax stuff. The papers in West Virginia skewered him, and then he's back in the funeral industry. And American Funeral Insider, which is the top trade magazine for the death care industry, has been skewering him over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years. So Henry just really got tired of being skewered and excoriated, and he just decided to tell his side of the story. I mean, it was really brave on his part. I'm proud of him.
No, yeah, I definitely have to take my hat off to him, because this is come on, man. One thing after another, it takes a lot of guts to stand up at this point and keep trying to fight back at this. So, Henry, if you're listening, I hope you call in to the after show, man, 702-605-4894. I'd love to hear from you directly, man. Incredible stuff. So what do you think? Before we start getting into the other stuff, we got another 10 minutes left before our break. And then I definitely want to talk to you about the Franklin scandal, your other book. And also, too, I know you did a lot of work on the Epstein case. Let me ask you a question. Has anybody ever looked into who's going around installing all this surveillance equipment? Maybe it's the same company?
Well, I think it was. Craig Spence was very candid with the Washington Times. He said intelligence, friendly, quote unquote, friendly intelligence agents installed the equipment in his house. So, and Craig Spence told Henry that CIA agents had installed the equipment. So, I think it would be safe to surmise that the CIA did indeed, probably, most likely, install the blackmail equipment in Craig Spence's home.
Incredible. So pretty much the whole operation was the operation from start to finish.
I believe it was, yes. And as I said earlier, the government did everything it could to cover it up by hammering Vinson, by hammering Henry with a 43-count RICO indictment. I mean, he was looking at 295 years, so that kind of shut him up.
Sure.
And then the Washington Post came in, and they just kind of kicked the Washington Times to the curb, and then they conscripted the New York Times and the L.A. Times to jump on its bandwagon, saying that all these stories that the Washington Times are writing about blackmail and CIA assets and all this other stuff is just delusional.
Oh, poo-poo.
So that's ultimately what happened, and then it was covered up. Henry went to prison. Didn't say anything, and the Washington Post ultimately rolled over the Washington Times, and the whole sordid chapter was forgotten up until Confessions of a D.C. Madam came out.
Now his connection
to... it's a very important part of, I think, American history that your listeners should be cognizant of. And, it's a very edifying book, and it shows... Not only does it really elucidate a segment of government, because political blackmail has been around forever. J. Edgar Hoover made a living at it, and it's no doubt it's still going on. I mean, the CIA has been doing it, the FBI has been doing it. There's accounts now that the NSA is doing it. But Henry's book, Confessions of a D.C. Madam, brings the reader into the machinations of a blackmail operation, a government blackmail operation. So it elucidates that, but then it also elucidates a spirit that refused to be broken, because Henry has been through a lot of trials and tribulations, and he absolutely refused to be broken by this. He is a successful, legitimate businessman, and although the government's come after him repeatedly, although he's been excoriated by the media for 25 years, he refused to be broken by this, and so I think it's a story that your listeners would, I think, cherish from both a human angle and then just a historical angle too.
Yeah, not only that too, but he's another guy just like you and me, and and all of us here together. We're trying to get this information out there, and he needs support. I mean, he needs his book bought, and he needs to be supported in his efforts in bringing out the truth. Now he knew Deborah Palfrey, the D.C. Madam. Does he have any information about how she died or how she wound up?
No, he didn't know her. Henry, when she came on the scene in Washington, D.C., Henry was a successful, legitimate businessman, so he never knew Deborah Jean Palfrey. But Henry will tell you this: Deborah Jean Palfrey, there's a lot of speculation and innuendo and rumor about whether or not she committed suicide, and she said that she absolutely wouldn't commit suicide, and then she committed suicide, and so there's a lot of speculation that she was murdered. I mean, I've talked to her attorney, Montgomery Sibley, and he doesn't know whether or not she committed suicide. I mean, she was all suddenly just had her life ripped up from her, and she tried to fight City Hall. She provided ABC with a 25-pound printout of numbers of her various clients, and ABC said that her clients, they were just like Joe Schmoes, even though she was providing at least one senator that we know of with escorts and a bunch of other people. So ABC lied there to keep that cover-up going, just like the Washington Post lied in Henry's situation.
You don't have a list of those numbers, do you?
But hold on a sec. Henry will say one thing, that he doesn't know whether or not Deborah Jean Palfrey committed suicide, but he feels that if he talked when they were putting screws to him. If he decided to talk, that he would have been murdered for sure. I mean, that's what he feels, and I would probably tend to agree with that too.
Okay, so Henry never released his book of phone numbers, right?
No, Henry cooperated completely with the government.
With the government, right? I got you. Okay,
and he got the consolation prize of 5 years in prison.
Right, I got you. Okay, but now you don't have a list of Deborah Palfrey's phone numbers, do you?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're here tonight with Nick Bryant. He's the author of Franklin's Scandal and also Confessions of a D.C. Madam, which he co-authored with Henry Vinson, Vinson. These are a couple of guys really putting it out there, investigating kind of stuff that really brings a hazard and risk to yourself, just like Henry had to do 5 years in prison. And then had another charge. Did he go to prison again for the IRS, or he got?
Yes, he did.
How many years?
He was given 41 months.
Okay, brother. Okay, man. Well, that's a stiff sentence, man, for IRS kind of stuff. Okay, guys, because you can make a deal with it.
It really actually had nothing to do with the IRS.
Oh, really?
I mean, it was IRS stuff, but it was the government. Diminishing Henry's credibility and showing him that they could throw him in prison anytime they wanted.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And then Henry's out now. He's a pilot. He's running his own business. He's doing very well. And he's putting his neck on the line here by writing this book and doing all this kind of stuff. So we really need to support him. Confessions of a D.C. Madam. He's got his own blog, Henry Vinson. blog.confessionsof-a-dcmadam.com. And so you can go there, and I'm sure there's all kinds of information on how to get his book and how to help support Henry and look into the other kind of work he's doing. We're going to be taking a break soon, and when we get back, we're going to be talking to Nick Bryant. I've been trying to get Nick Bryant for so long, you have no idea. We're going to be talking more about the Franklin scandal, get into that, a little bit about the Epstein scandal. And another question I always wanted to ask you, too, Nick, was about the Penn State Sandusky stuff. And how much that all fits into this. Again, it seems to be the same in Seville in England. It seems to be the same pattern over and over and over and over again. Before we take a break, what is it about these people in power that makes them want to have sex with little kids?
Well, I think that pedophiles exist in all social strata.
Yeah.
But I think pedophiles in the upper social strata have a tendency to molest children with impunity. I think that's where the big difference is.
Okay. All right, we'll be taking a little break here. It's a nice little 5-minute break, Henry. Nick, so you can go get a drink, whatever you want to do, and come back. We'll be right back after these messages. Okay, well, I'm hearing that the our ad didn't play, but I guess we'll have that straightened out by next week. I want to give a shout out and a big thanks to JP, who really helped us out with a lot of technical stuff tonight. And JP is he's the owner of everbeyondradio.com, and you can check out his radio show archives, and he has awesome meditation products and shungite and crystal devices. And he does soul readings, all kinds of stuff. Okay, I was going to say weird stuff, but good old JP. And he has another show called Journeys with JP on Revolution Radio at 8 p.m. Mondays in Studio B. And good old JP is a really cool guy, and he helped us out with a lot of stuff tonight. But we're here tonight with Nick Bryant. Written a book called Confessions of a D.C. Madam, but he's also very well known for his book. It's a pretty recent book too. Is The Franklin Scandal. Okay, and we have a link to that on my website as well. So we are back with Nick Bryant. Nick, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, brother.
I'm back.
Thank you very much. Now, tell us about the Franklin scandal. I've had Mayor Jim Rothstein on the show, and I know he helped out with that kind of stuff. He knew the camp and stuff. But give us an overall version, and then we'll get into more details on the Franklin scandal.
Okay, the Franklin Scandal is a book that I spent 7 years writing. It's about an interstate pedophile network that flew kids from coast to coast and pandered them to the rich and powerful, and also the political elite. And in Henry's book, we talk about Craig Spence, a CIA asset who had his house wired for audiovisual blackmail. Well, Lawrence E. King of Omaha would fly these kids around the country. And with the Franklin scandal, I acquired most of the documents that were sealed by a grand jury, and I also acquired the sealed grand jury testimony. And a lot of those documents, I collected over 200 flight receipts, and most of the flight receipts go to Washington, D.C., and a lot of the kids who I interviewed talk about being flown to Washington, D.C. And there, Craig Spence had his party house that we talked about about last book, Henry's book, that was wired for audiovisual blackmail. And ultimately what happened there was 2 grand juries were formed to say that this pedophile network didn't exist. And I have the sealed transcripts of one of the grand juries, and I showed that grand jury was truly a travesty of justice.
Hey, let me ask you a question. How did you get a hold of the sealed transcripts?
You get people to trust you after a while.
Okay.
And once you build up trust, and they firmly believe that you will not, because the people that did give me the sealed testimony, they could potentially end up in prison for doing that. So they trusted me to the point where they knew that I wouldn't give them up.
Okay.
And that I would eat 18 months for contempt before I give anybody up. So once I established that kind of trust, and it took a while, it took about 4 years. I worked on the Franklin scandal for 7 years. But once I established that trust over the course of about 4 years, I was able to get the sealed grand jury testimony. And I don't know if your listeners really know how a grand jury works, but I should probably fill that in a little bit. Grand jury has like an authoritative ring, like the gods from Mount Olympus have sent down a decree. When people hear a grand jury indicted such and such, it's like the gods from Mount Olympus have sent down a decree. But grand juries are very notorious because they're easily hijacked. With a grand jury, you appoint a special prosecutor. And then you have grand jurors who are just regular citizens that have just shown up for jury duty, and they've been funneled into a grand jury. And whatever evidence the special prosecutor deems worthy, whatever witnesses the prosecutor deems worthy, those are the only witnesses that are called. It's not adversarial at all. The special prosecutor controls who the grand jurors hear and what the grand jurors see. So there was a New York chief appellate judge that once said that grand jurors have so much power, or special prosecutors have so much power over grand jurors that they can get grand jurors to indict a ham sandwich. And I show in my book, The Franklin Scandal, that the one grand jury, the state grand jury, and the federal grand jury was essentially the same, but I didn't get the sealed transcripts for that one. I got the sealed transcripts for the state grand jury. I show what a travesty of justice it was. It was hijacked. It let all the perps off completely walk for molesting all these kids. And there were two kids who stood up to this unbelievable juggernaut of power and corruption, and they were indicted for perjury. The girl, Alicia Owens, was looking at 160 years for perjury. He was indicted on 8 counts. Each count carried up to 20 years. And the boy, Paul Benassi, was looking at 60 years. He was indicted on 3 counts. So in this particular grand jury, it cleared all the pedophiles, and it indicted the kids that wouldn't talk or that refused to recant their accounts of abuse.
Right, because in these grand juries, not only can they convict a ham sandwich, but they can also let a mass murderer free, very easily, because they can totally run the DA totally runs it and gets what he wants every time.
Yeah, a special prosecutor. Well, the DA is generally who appoints the special prosecutor, and sometimes in Henry's case, the principal person that was prosecuting Henry was Alan Strasser, who was an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Washington, D.C., and he was appointed to indict Henry, and through the book it had a 43-count RICO indictment. So, I mean, that was obviously a travesty of justice, too, because Henry was just operating an escort service. So there have been innumerable examples of grand juries that have been hijacked, and Americans really don't understand the grand jury system, which is truly a sad scenario, because if they better understood the grand jury system, they wouldn't give as much credibility to grand juries as they give. Because and I think the grand jury system needs to be overhauled, because it's just too easy. It's just too easy to indict people that shouldn't be indicted, and to let people walk that shouldn't walk. I mean, it's really it's a system that needs to be overhauled.
Well, let me ask you this. In the Franklin scandal, whatever happened to the careers of these prosecutors in that case?
Well, in the Franklin scandal, everybody who was part of the judiciary that enabled the pedophiles to walk and ended up putting Alicia Owen away in prison, the girl who wouldn't recant her abuse was sentenced to between 9 and 15 years for perjury. She was indicted when she was a 21-year-old girl. She started getting molested when she was 15, and she was indicted when she was 21. And when she was 22, she was sentenced to between 9 and 15 years in prison. Little girl.
Yeah.
And she ended up serving nearly 2 years in solitary confinement. But everyone that participated in that grand jury or putting Alicia Owen away became upwardly mobile. The U.S. magistrate that participated became a U.S. District Court judge. The assistant U.S. attorney that participated in the cover-up became a U.S. magistrate. The prosecutor of Alicia Owen, and in my book I show that her trial was very much a kangaroo court. The prosecutor of Alicia Owen, he became a Douglas County District Court judge. Omaha is in Douglas County. And then the prosecutor after him, who ensured that Alicia Owen stayed in prison because her trial was filled with so many travesties of justice, and there were multiple appeals, he became an assistant U.S. attorney. So, and then on the flip side, because Henry's story is kind of a continuation of this, on the flip side, the U.S. attorney for the District of D.C., who covered up Henry's story, he became an assistant U.S. attorney general, and then he was later hired by the Raytheon Corporation as a vice president. So everyone that helped cover up this blackmail and this pedophile network in the judiciary got suddenly found themselves upwardly mobile.
Gotcha. Okay, so everyone in the cover-up had a great career after that. How are these kids doing now?
You know, it's poetic justice because the kids that came forward and refused to recant are doing really well. And the kids that never came forward are the kids that recanted because the FBI pressured them to recant. They're pretty much they're drug addicts or alcoholics.
Oh, really?
They're dead. I mean, it's truly sad. There's nothing but a wake of carnage here, and it's truly the Franklin scandal is a truly heartbreaking story because of this huge interstate pedophile network that molested all these children with impunity. It's really heartbreaking. But the reason I wrote it was because children should not be molested with impunity in the United States of America. The judiciary, both state and federal, should not assist pedophiles in molesting children. And in this case, both state and federal judiciaries assisted pedophiles in molesting children. So I just felt like this was a book that had to be written. And I've had written a lot about children's issues before I wrote the Franklin scandal. Actually, I wrote a book called America's Children Trying for Tragedy, where I looked at all the problems of lower socioeconomic children growing up in America. And when I came across that Franklin pedophile network, I decided that I just had to hang in there and write a book about it. It took me 7 years. It took me a lot of work, but I'm glad that I wrote the book.
Well, let me ask you this. Why don't you describe that case, the whole story about Larry King and the Franklin Credit Union, and give people a little overall view of what happened there. But then I want to hear about how did it even get before a grand jury? Like, how did this, if it was all being covered up so much, how did it even get to the grand jury to begin with? Was it to shut these kids up?
Well, the Franklin scandal gets its name from the Franklin Federal Credit Union, which was owned and operated, Lawrence C. King, who was a Republican power broker and big shot, was the general manager of the Franklin Credit Union. That's how the Franklin scandal gets its name. That credit union was essentially a front for a nationwide pedophile network. And now how it got to the point of a grand jury is kind of interesting because social services had accounts of King molesting children. And had accounts of King being involved in child pornography, had accounts of Lawrence C. King flying children to be tendered in various cities, interstate transportation of children. So Nebraska Social Services went to both state and federal law enforcement, and they said, hey, we've got kids coming forward that are talking about Lawrence C. King being involved in child pornography. They're talking about Lawrence C. King flying them to different states to be pandered, and they were just simply ignored. So ultimately, when King molesting children, he was also stealing money from the Franklin Credit Union. In totality, he stole about $40 million from the Franklin Credit Union. And a number of Nebraska senators were perplexed how King could steal $40 million from this credit union because federal credit unions are supposed to be audited every year, and this credit union had been audited in 4 years. So they set up a committee called the Franklin Committee to look at the looting of this credit union and why this credit union had been looted over the course of all these years and it hadn't been audited. So when this Senate subcommittee formed, the state subcommittee formed, these social services personnel came to the senators and they said that the Franklin Credit Union was essentially a front for a nationwide pedophile network. So these senators hired a very good investigator named Gary Caradori.
Okay.
And he started to find victims. In addition to the victims that had already come forward, he started to find other victims. And he found himself, the FBI went into a full court press at that point. They started threatening people who were meeting with Caradori. They started threatening Caradori. I mean, Caradori's phones were tapped. He was followed. And Caradori got the mother lode of evidence in Chicago. one of King's blackmail photographers had become disenchanted with King for whatever reason. I'm not quite able to figure that out. And he gave Gary Caradori a bunch of pictures of King's pedophilic orgies, where the pictures showed who the kids were and who some of the power brokers were. And Caradori was flying back to Nebraska, and he was going to break that case wide open, and the dominoes were going to start falling in Omaha, and they were going to fall all the way to Washington, D.C., and his plane just mysteriously broke up over Lee County, Illinois, and he was killed. And the pictures were never recovered. But in the Franklin scandal, I've got 5 sources that say that Caradori acquired pictures in Chicago.
Now, that photographer, he's back in prison right now, right?
He is not. No, he's roaming somewhere in Nebraska, I do believe. I haven't talked to him. And,
what was his name again?
His name was Rusty Nelson.
Rusty Nelson. Okay, correct. But he was rearrested recently.
He was arrested about 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah, and what kind of charges was that?
I think he was arrested for he did time for child pornography, and I think he was arrested for not registering as a sex offender.
Okay, and now he's back out and he's wandering around. He's like on the run, hiding.
I have no idea. I haven't talked to him in a number of years.
Yeah, because he did some interviews too, as well, talking about all this. Oh boy. Okay, and what about now? There was some allegations in the Franklin case about Hunter S. Thompson.
Not true.
Okay, really?
Not true. I don't believe that they are, but they might be. I don't know.
Wait, you're not familiar with the allegations, or that you don't believe them?
I'm familiar with them.
Okay.
I just don't know what to make of that. I'm not going to comment on it.
Okay, very interesting though. Okay, so you don't think that you think possibly that Hunter S. Thompson had nothing to do with any of this?
I have. I'm not going to comment on
okay.
it. I'm
okay.
not sure.
Okay, good, because that's one of my big questions that I've always had about this, because I've heard his name brought up over and over, and I just wondered about it. Now, there was also another name, too, brought up in the Franklin scandal case, Colonel Michael Aquino.
According to one of the victims, and according to Rusty Nelson, Aquino was affiliated with King. Aquino has denied that, though.
Right.
So, but I wasn't able to find any other corroboration other than one of the victims and Rusty Nelson.
Okay. Okay, very interesting.
But the thing about the Franklin scandal is it's been sensationalized with Hunter Thompson and Michael Aquino and the Illuminati and shape-shifting reptilians and all this other stuff. And what really bothers me about that is the Franklin scandal is about an interstate pedophile network that operated for years that destroyed dozens and dozens and dozens of children, and it was covered up by the federal government. That's what the Franklin scandal is about. I mean, there are some sensational aspects about the Franklin scandal, but the Franklin scandal is ultimately about an interstate child prostitution network that provided children to the rich and the powerful, and it was covered up by state and federal law enforcement, including the FBI and Department of Justice. That's the take-home message with the Franklin scandal. Unfortunately, these other things have gotten involved in the Franklin scandal and have spun it out of have just spun it out of reality. And that's a little frustrating for me because I looked into this for 7 years. And
Gotcha.
I talked to people about the Franklin scandal, and then they start talking to me about, like, the Illuminati and shape-shifting reptilians. And the Illuminati and shape-shifting reptilians never came up in my investigation of the Franklin scandal, and I investigated it for 7 years, and those things never came up. So I would have to surmise that I know the Franklin scandal is probably better than anybody alive, and I have never come across shape-shifting reptilians or members of the Illuminati when I've investigated the Franklin scandal.
You know, that's interesting because I've followed this case quite closely too, as well. Not as you, but but the thing is that I've never heard anything about shape-shifting reptilians in this case.
What I'm saying is
okay.
that it's the case has been spun up with so much apocrypha.
Gotcha.
That it gets a little frustrating for me because it takes away from the seriousness of what went down there. Because all this apocrypha, and people have embraced the apocrypha before they embrace the truth with the Franklin scandal, and that gets it's a little frustrating for me because I spent 7 years writing the Franklin scandal, and I talked to a lot of victims of child abuse who were abused with impunity and whose lives were destroyed. And so I get a little disappointed when people start sensationalizing the Franklin scandal. I mean, it's a very sensational story the way it is.
Yeah, the story is extreme enough because Lawrence King actually sang the national anthem twice at the Republican
National. Just once.
Okay.
In 1984, he didn't sing it in '88, but he did throw a big bash for Bush in 1988, and Jack Kemp and Gerald Ford and Alexander Haig were on the committee that was part of King's folly of reelecting George Herbert Walker, of the election of George Herbert Walker Bush. So yes, there were a lot of powerful people associated with Larry King, and he was part of the blackmail operation that we talked about earlier.
Right.
So it's a very sensational story. It's just all this apocrypha has inundated the story, and it's a little frustrating for me because the real story is that all these children were abused with impunity, and people talk about this and that and this and that really have that may or may not have something to do with the Franklin scandal, but at most they're tangential elements of the Franklin scandal.
Now let me ask you this: now, if Lawrence King stole $40 million, where did all that money go? Because right now he's working at a car dealership.
He was at a BMW dealership in Virginia, and I think that he pocketed a lot of the money, and I've heard accounts of where some of the money ended up, but I was never really able to satisfactorily corroborate those accounts. So I don't want to speculate on that.
Okay. Now was he ever charged? He was charged, but he was acquitted.
No, he was never charged with child abuse.
He was never, but he was charged with.
According, Lawrence E. King was responsible for molesting dozens and dozens of children over probably a decade, and he was not charged with one count of child abuse. He was charged with financial crimes for embezzling money from the Franklin Credit Union, but he was both state and federal authorities never charged him with one count of child abuse.
Wow, that's amazing in itself as well. And now, besides these other names you mentioned, like Al Haig and people that were politically involved with Lawrence King, what other names came up that you think were involved in the child molestation?
Well, I think you've got 3 grand juries that
right
to cover it up. You've got the FBI and Department of Justice covering it up in Nebraska, and you've got the Secret Service and Department of Justice covering it up in Washington, D.C. You've got the Washington Post covering it up in D.C.
again.
And according to confessions of a D.C. madam, you've got someone in Bush's cabinet helping to cover it up. So I would think that it went very, very high up the food chain in the Republican Party. In fact, the chairman of the Franklin Committee, Lawrence Schmidt, received a phone call on the floor of the legislature, and the caller had told him not to investigate the Franklin Credit Union because it would go to the highest levels of the Republican Party. And Gary Caradori, the investigator that was hired by the Franklin Committee, who was, I believe, murdered, wrote a letter to Jerry Spence, the famous lawyer, and he said that the pedophile network went to the highest levels of the government. So I think it would be safe to assume that it went to the highest levels of the government.
Okay, and very similar to the Epstein case, which also goes up to the highest levels of the government. You have Bill Clinton involved. and flying on his plane and stuff like that. And also, too, Bill Clinton's Secret Service detail flying on that plane. And again, the same thing as well with the prosecutors being kind of investigated themselves by Epstein's legal team. What can you tell us about the Epstein? So nothing stopped. If anything, it's getting worse.
Yeah, the Epstein case is, again, powerful people abusing children with impunity. With the Epstein, one of the differences between the Epstein case and the Franklin case is the Franklin case was Republicans being provided with little boys.
Okay.
And in the Epstein case, it's Democrats being provided with little girls. So I guess there is truly partisanship when it comes to molesting children.
That's so interesting, too. And you would always think that it's the Democrats that support homosexuality, and it's the Republicans that are Christian, and right wing. But here you look at it, it's fascinating when you think of it that way,
It's just one of the idiosyncrasies of our power elite, I guess.
Yeah. Now, with Epstein, okay, one of the things that always interested me is where did this guy come from? Because he was at Lafayette High School in Brooklyn, and Coney Island, Brooklyn, a public high school, and then he winds up at these Cooper Union, and Cooper Union at the time was full scholarship. Have you looked into his early life to see how did this guy come from Welcome Back Kotter in Brooklyn to being a billionaire?
Well, he taught at Dalton, which
right.
is like a premier school for the elite of New York. He taught math, and then he ultimately made the leap to Bear Stearns. And then he...
Wait, but Nick, let's stop there for a second, because how did he get to Dalton? He didn't have a college degree.
Yes, that's one of the... from what I understand, he's quite brilliant.
Okay.
As far as mathematics. And then, from Bear Stearns, he was hired by Stephen Hoffenberg. Are you familiar with Stephen Hoffenberg?
No, is he one of the Bear Stearns guys? Oh,
Hoffenberg was arrested.
Right. Okay, I'm familiar with that. Okay, yeah.
For the $475 million Ponzi scheme.
Right.
I think it's the third largest Ponzi scheme to date, and where he basically embezzled a bunch of money from Towers investors. Now, Epstein was working for Hoffenberg when that went down. Now, according to Hoffenberg, Epstein was part and parcel of that Ponzi scheme, but Hoffenberg, according to Hoffenberg, he decided that he didn't want to take down everybody else with him, and that he ate this prison sentence by himself. The feds put him away for like 20 years. And I think that if he had worked with the feds, he probably would have done 20 years, or 18 years. So I would have to surmise that Epstein probably was part of that Ponzi scheme that Hoffenberg ultimately went to prison for.
Now, is Hoffenberg out of prison?
According to Hoffenberg,
yeah.
Epstein was part of it.
Is Hoffenberg still in prison, or he's out?
He's out now, and he's not a big fan of Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay. Well, no one should be, except I think Dershowitz still likes him in some ways, But now, you're saying you think Epstein's a brilliant guy because the woman, I think her name was Victoria Ward from that Vanity Fair reporter. She wasn't impressed with Epstein.
She was Vicky Ward.
Yeah, Vicky Ward. Yeah, she didn't seem impressed by him at all.
Well, I'm just telling you what people have said about Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay.
And that they thought that he was brilliant. Hoffenberg, who was quite brilliant himself, I mean, he was certainly a major power player in the world of finance in New York for many years. He considered Epstein to be quite brilliant. So that's what people thought about Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, and let me ask you another question now, because now this girl, Veronica Roberts, who's pretty much leading the way with these.
Virginia Roberts.
I'm sorry, Virginia Roberts. I'm sorry. Now, she worked at Mar-a-Lago for Donald Trump?
I believe she did, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, did you ever clarify, because I've heard, and her father did as well.
Her father did, and that supposedly where Epstein met her, I believe.
Right. Now how did, right, and now he was meeting all these other girls, because he had these young girls as pimps, basically trolling the high school for him there.
Yes.
But this other one he met...
Actually, junior high. I mean, the
Right.
youngest one that we've found was 12.
Yeah.
So they were younger than just high school girls.
I know, and when you read those, the probable cause affidavit by these cops, it's just heartbreaking, because you read about these cops knocking on people's doors, and telling these parents, hey, your daughter's involved in this situation. The kids are lying to their parents. I have my daughter is 14, I could just imagine the horrific situation with all these people. But now, was it ever clarified where that Veronica, you said her name was Veronica Roberts?
Virginia Roberts.
Virginia Roberts. Okay, sorry. Virginia Roberts. Now did she work at this Palm Beach resort owned by Donald Trump as a hat check, a coat check girl, or did she work in the ladies' locker room gym there?
I mean, she was like 14 when she met Epstein. So
Right.
if she did, in fact, work there, I mean, I'm sure it was kind of an under-the-table type thing.
Right.
I don't really know the particulars exactly of how Epstein met her. But there were a lot of... I was the one that released Epstein's black book on Gawker.
Okay.
And I was also the one that released all the flight logs that shows Clinton flying with Epstein. I was the one that released all that stuff on Gawker. You can Google Nick Bryant and Gawker, and you can download Epstein's black book, and you can also look at all the flight logs where Clinton is on flights with unidentified young girls. Alan Dershowitz is on flights with unidentified young girls. Those flight logs are quite telling, as is Epstein's little black book, which I was able to acquire a couple of years ago.
What do you make of Chris Tucker being on that flight?
I have no idea. It was a party plane. It was like a Lolita Express.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys were molesting those girls.
Because Chris Tucker also flew around that young boy that had the criminal case against Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I would say that if you're flying around with Jeffrey Epstein, chances are you're up to no good.
Now let me ask another question too, because now in that Palm Beach mansion, okay, now in the probable cause affidavit, the walls were covered with naked pictures of young girls in that mansion. Now,
there were pictures of naked girls. The walls weren't covered.
Okay.
But one of the interesting things about that warrant is it shows that there were hidden. And so Epstein probably had a little blackmail operation going on, very much like Craig Spence.
Well, yeah, and again, in the affidavit, they describe it as being for the purpose of blackmail.
I've got that affidavit, and it doesn't say blackmail, but it does mention the hidden cameras in Epstein's.
Are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure I read the affidavit myself. Yeah. Okay, I'll have to take a look. Okay.
I was actually, I think, because I released the affidavit. I was the one that got the affidavit. I think on the internet too.
Okay.
A lot of the Epstein documentation that's floating around the internet comes from me.
Okay, very good. I tried to get you as a guest when I was doing that show. I had Dick Morrow on the show. Now let me ask you another question too. Now, also Epstein, he also had a high school transcript in his possession. Now, what information do you have about that?
I don't have any on that.
Okay. On that. But now that's interesting though. How do you think he got that?
I don't know. I don't have a clue.
Now, why wouldn't there be an outrage with the parents in that neighborhood saying, "Hey, let's investigate the schools and find out how he got this"?
Well, the thing about the Epstein case is it was, again, we have a corrupt grand jury.
Yeah.
There was a grand jury that was formed. And the Palm Beach Police Department, after all, Jeffrey Epstein is a billionaire. And the Palm Beach Police Department pursued Epstein diligently, but gingerly. I mean, they didn't want to. Epstein had donated money to everybody, including the Palm Beach Police Department, and but they ultimately came up with that with the affidavit for a search warrant. They had 5 girls that had come forward, underage girls that were molested by Epstein, and then they had a number of corroborating witnesses. I think there were like 18 people in all on the affidavit for a search warrant. There were the 5 victims, and then there was a number of victims that corroborated, or a number of witnesses that corroborated the victims. So ultimately, Epstein should have been charged with the molestation of 5 children, and the Palm Beach Police Department knew of more, and actually the feds knew of more too. But Epstein should have been charged with those 5, but a grand jury was called. And lo and behold, the grand jury didn't indict Epstein on a single count of child molestation. It indicted him on 1 count of soliciting an adult. So that was a grand jury that was definitely a ham sandwich.
Yeah. Now, what about...
And there was so much outrage. Michael Ryder, who was the head of the Palm Beach Police Department, just had a tremendous amount of outrage, and all those detectives too. I mean, they worked really hard, and they had a solid case. I mean, Epstein should have gone to prison for years. I mean, they just wanted to indict him outright, but the state attorney for Palm Beach decided to form a grand jury, which is very strange because usually in Florida, grand juries are only formed for capital offenses. So that was a little fishy right out of the gate with that grand jury. And when that grand jury didn't come back with any counts of child abuse against Jeffrey Epstein, there was a tremendous amount of outrage with the Palm Beach Police Department. And actually the Palm Beach Post, too, there was outrage there. So the federal government stepped in, the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice said, okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to form a grand jury, and we're going to go after Jeffrey Epstein. And ultimately what happened was, I've got the emails between the assistant U.S. attorney that quote-unquote prosecuted Epstein and Epstein, one of Epstein's attorneys. I have their emails.
Okay.
And there was a third article I wrote for Gawker about these emails, and but Gawker has yet to publish the third article I wrote on the Epstein saga. But these emails are very telling because they're basically working out a way on how they can get Jeffrey Epstein the least amount of time. But the feds insisted that Jeffrey Epstein plead to 1 count of child abuse, and then also 1 count of adult solicitation. So he was potentially looking at 20 years because the 1 count of child molestation was 5 years, and then the 1 count of soliciting adult was 5 years, and then the minor was 15 years. So he was looking at 20 years, and then he was given 18 months in a county jail. He wasn't even put into prison. He was given a county jail, and he only had to spend nights there. He could go out during the day, and he ultimately did 13 months.
And it was a private wing, too.
But the feds, now this is where it gets very troubling, because the feds had a list of approximately 35 kids that he molested, and they were aware of more. But they had a list of 35 kids that he had molested. I mean, that's where it's really gets troubling. Is again, like with the Franklin scandal, we have the federal government, the Department of Justice, covering up child molestation. It's truly tragic.
Yeah, and these 30 kids, he settled civil lawsuits with many of these kids as well, right?
He has settled over 30 civil lawsuits regarding
Right.
his molestation of minors at this point.
Now, but even still, after all of this, Bill Clinton, his daughter Chelsea Clinton, had a wedding, and who attended that wedding?
Ghislaine Maxwell. That was Epstein's principal procurer, and she's blue blood from the UK. Her father was a scion of he was a major publisher, and Ghislaine Maxwell was part of Epstein's pedophile network. Actually, she molested kids too, and
Right.
she made child pornography, and she was one of the honored guests at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. You can see as Chelsea is walking right down the aisle, you can see Ghislaine Maxwell right there with a big smile on her face. And what's really telling, what the feds did, is they immunized everyone in that case. Maxwell was immunized, and all the girls that were providing Epstein with these young girls were also immunized. So it's that deal that the feds made was quite amazing. And all conspirators. So the perps were immunized too.
Right.
In the deal that Epstein made, everybody was immunized, and Epstein did 13 months. So all the perps that were molesting those girls and all the procurers of those girls, they were all immunized by the federal government, which is just mind-boggling. And then
it's
the
not
federal
like...
government knew that there was going to be trouble if that deal ever was made public, so they sealed it. And some of the attorneys representing some of these girls, and then the Palm Beach Post ultimately appealed the sealing of it, and then it was unsealed, and lo and behold, it showed what a cover-up it was. I mean, the feds came in and covered it all up.
Now,
very stunning.
That's an interesting point right now, because now the lawsuit that's taking place right now, right?
Yes.
Can you describe that? Because a lot of people think, well, it's he said, she said, and these girls are out for money. But describe what's going on with this litigation right now that Alan Dershowitz's being brought into, and then Prince Andrew's being mentioned in. Describe that litigation right now.
Well, what's happened was that the Epstein case is essentially going to be, because Epstein made that deal with the feds, and that was supposed to be it. But a judge is willing to overturn that deal. So that's where we're at this point, is these attorneys are pressing, and one of these attorneys is a former federal judge, are pressing for this really, really bad, just horrific, corrupt deal that the feds had made with Epstein to be overturned. And the judge is compatible with that. So we're just going to see how it goes from here. And that's how Alan Dershowitz got dragged into this. Now, if you read my Gawker article, Alan Dershowitz said that he didn't meet Jeffrey Epstein until Larry Summers was president of Harvard. And that happened around 2001. Well, actually, I had Alan Dershowitz on flight logs with Jeffrey Epstein in 1997. So Alan Dershowitz was being less than veritable when he was granting interviews disavowing his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
And even those flight logs are pretty sketchy to begin with. There's a lot of people, unknown passing, a lot of first names. And so who knows who else is on those flight logs?
Yes. Well, there are a number of girls named on those flight logs. So, I mean, who knows? We just don't know who they are or how young they were.
Right.
I mean, that's where we're at with that.
But now,
although
you feel confident.
What's that?
You feel confident that this judge is going to overturn this ruling and reopen this case, and Epstein can possibly get some real time?
I hope that that's the case. We'll see. We'll
Okay.
see. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on him, probably to let sleeping dogs lie, but I really hope that this judge overturns this ruling. And And Jeffrey Epstein is held accountable for molesting these girls, and the other big shots that he gave these girls to. I hope that they're held accountable too.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. But come on, seriously, how confident are you that that could happen? Look, from your experience with Franklin, with your friend Henry Vinson, and now this,
Well, you've got two lawyers that are pushing very hard for it.
They really are, yeah.
And they're really courageous guys. They named Alan Dershowitz, and one of them is a federal judge,
right?
A former federal judge. So, and Brad Edwards, the other attorney, I've talked to him a number of times, and he is just—it's anathema to him to see all these children molested with impunity. Just anathema to him. So, and I'm glad that this other lawyer has signed on with Edwards. So, and what they did was really guessing naming Alan Dershowitz and Prince Andrew. So, right. I really hope that pays off for him.
Okay, so now moving on from that, the Sandusky case. Do you see the same pattern with Sandusky again, where there was a DA that wound up dead and his hard drive is all destroyed and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, DA Greikar, I talked to a DA that worked in that office, and she told me that she felt that Greikar had been murdered. As far as Sandusky being part of a larger network, there's only been one person that's come forward to say that Sandusky was part of a larger network, and that was Greg Bucciaroni.
Okay.
And Bucciaroni had been molested by pedophile Edward Savitz in Philadelphia. And Bucciaroni said that Savitz drove him to like a second mile function with Sandusky. So at this point, and I've talked to Bucciaroni, so at this point, he is the only one that's come forward that's connected Sandusky to other pedophiles. Now, there very well might be other pedophiles in the mix here, but at this point, we just have the word of just one man.
But even Sandusky, there was so much known about him. He was even banned from some of these locker rooms at these colleges. So much was covered up and well known about what he was doing. There was a lot of people who knew what he was doing. Don't you think in that case there should be like another 20 people that should be in prison right now?
Well, there were a lot of people that certainly covered it up.
Yeah.
And it should have come out at least twice that he was molesting children. But unfortunately, children are not the United States' most precious resource. I mean, the United States says that children are its most precious resource. If you talk to most politicians, they will say that our children are the most precious resource. But actually, America is a country that doesn't really put its money where its mouth is.
Right.
22.5% of American children live below the poverty threshold. At least 10 million of them suffer from hunger or malnutrition. At least once a month, I believe. They're the fast-growing segment of the homeless population, children. So America is a country that pays great lip service to its children to put its money where its mouth is. And what is going on now in America, I mean, when you've got 22.5% of American children living below the poverty threshold and children becoming the fast-growing segment of the homeless population, you've got like a wholesale destruction of children. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm radical but all you got to do is look at the numbers, and you can see that there's a wholesale destruction of children going on in this country.
Yeah, there's a big difference between radical
and wherever
realistic.
There's a wholesale destruction, there's going to be a retail destruction, and that's manifested through what we've been talking about: Franklin, Epstein, Sandusky. These children, unfortunately, were put in the back seat. The prestige, the power, trumped any kind of rights that these children had, and it's truly unfortunate.
There's a big difference between radical and realistic, and I think you're being realistic in what we're saying here.
Well, as George Orwell said, telling the truth during times of universal deceit is a radical act.
Do you think there's any hope in these institutions like Child Protective Services or reaching it? Is there any hope? Or are these people a place to find help, or no?
Well, I think that there are people in Child Protective Services. I mean, you saw it in the Franklin scandal that did come forward and try to do the right thing. I'm sure that there's a lot of corrupt people. I mean, there were certainly people that were very corrupt in the Franklin scandal in Child Services. So, but I think as long as our country is just going to pay lip service to its children, right, and not put its money where its mouth is, this is going to be a non-ending story. It's what America needs to do is really help its children, and by 2032, there's probably going to be two workers per retiree, and right now, almost 1 in 4 of them is growing up below the poverty threshold. So we're setting ourselves up for a very dysfunctional society in less than 15 or 16 years.
But, with all the stuff we've talked about today, right, and with the Secret Service involvement and prosecutors' involvement, short of a huge congressional hearing, is there any hope of turning this whole thing around? Because, like you said, the CIA is benefiting from this. The Secret Service, is there any hope?
Well, the thing about it is, I think only 25% of Americans have confidence in their government at this point.
Yeah.
Americans know that their government has gone awry, but they don't know just how badly it's gone awry. And they're going to have to be edified. They're going to have to read books like Confessions of a D.C. Madam. They're going to have to read books like the Franklin scandal. And then they're going to see the degree of the disease that's taken over our government. And because you can't treat a disease until it's diagnosed. So once enough Americans can see this diagnosis, can see that there's a cancer eating away in our government, then we can act, then we can treat it. But Americans are, unfortunately, they watch a lot of television, and television, they're not going to get truth like what's in Confessions of a D.C. Madam or the Franklin scandal from television. I mean, 5 corporations own 90% of the media that Americans imbibe. And those 5 corporations exist because the government allows them to exist. So they're not going to make the government too upset, or else the government will just come after them with an antitrust suit. So at this point, we have the government and the media working in tandem. It's really good that we have the Internet. If we didn't have the Internet, it would be very difficult to ferret out truths.
Yeah, but you want to know what, Nick? When I did my last show about the Epstein, when I posted the link list on Facebook and all over the place, I posted a link around to promote the show. So many people email me and say, you know what, you're a sucker. You believe everything. These girls, they got a book deal. They don't even follow what the case is, So I'm a little depressed, okay, Nick, at the end of this show. But we're down to the last 3 minutes. Nick, how can people support your work and support your work and find your website? Give us everything.
Well, people can buy Confessions of a D.C. Madam. They can buy the Franklin scandal. They can educate themselves. There are a lot of good books floating around, like Confessions of a D.C. Madam and the Franklin scandal. And they can, as I said earlier, edify themselves. Because the more people really understand how perfidious the government is, how perfidious the corporate media is, then at a certain point there'll be a sea change. I believe that a sea change is possible. but it's going to take a critical mass of people becoming aware. I mean, awareness is the key.
But even with with Clinton being on this plane with Epstein and inviting Epstein's girlfriend, Picurio, to his daughter's wedding, right in our face. You know what I mean? You still.
Well, and I'm sure that that's probably going to be difficult for Hillary when she runs.
You really think so?
For president, I think that'll be an issue. I really do.
Well, I hope so, man. I really hope so. Nick, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. And I'm going to beg you to come back again. I hope you had a good time, and I hope my questions were, I was a little unfocused tonight. I apologize for that. But I'm really impressed with your work, my friend, and I take my hat off to you. And I thank you for putting your neck out there, and also to Henry Vinson for his work and putting his neck out there. I really appreciate it, because I can relate, we're all kind of sticking our necks out, and I can relate to what you're doing. So I hope people will support you by buying the book, Confessions of a D.C. Madam, and also The Franklin Scandal, both books. And I got links to both of these books on my blog, the Opperman Report blog. But you can also get them at Nick's website, which is franklinscandal.com, and also the blog of our friend there, Henry Vinson, which is blog.confessionsofaDCmadam.com. You got any appearances or anything coming up you want to plug, Nick?
I've got a number of radio interviews coming up for Confessions of a D.C. Madam, but I just take one radio interview at a time.
Okay.
Exactly know. Although I've got a bunch of them coming up, I don't know exactly who yet at this point.
I got you, my friend. Listen, you have an open door here, okay? Anytime you want to come back, something you want to promote, man, let me know. You come right back, man. I'd love to have you on again, okay?
Okay, Ed, that sounds good.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, have yourself a good night.
Good night, sir. Okay, so tonight we had Nick Bryant, the author of Confessions of a D.C. Madam, and also the author of Confession of the Franklin Scandal. Really incredible guys out there working for us and trying to get this information out. And I really do appreciate the work that he's doing, and I want to thank him again. So we'll be right back after this. We'll be taking your phone call, 702-605-4894. Hey, maybe Henry Vinson. I know you're listening out there, my friend. Maybe you can call in and hear what's going on. I'm going to try and play these ads. We had a little problem last time, so we'll try it again. Maybe Ann can tell me if they're playing or not. If they're not, how's that? Okay, we are back with the Opperman Report After Show, brought to you by Audible.com. You go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. You go there for free. You sign up for free. Get yourself a free audiobook. We had some problems with the ads playing tonight live. Of course, we'll add them to the iHeart and Spreaker and YouTube and all that kind of stuff like that. But I just want to thank again JP from Journeys with JP, and I want to thank all of our sponsors, Mike Ray from InfinityHomeplans.com, Amanda from Pacific West Bamboo, Tammy from Essential Oils, and also to the New World Mexican Women. And these are all the people that support our show every week. And also just want a little shout out to all the stations out there that cover us, Shazaz and Awake Radio and 1800 and PSN and Wolf Spirit. Good old JP from Wolf Spirit has been such a huge help for us all day today, man. From his own show, Journeys for JP, on Revolution Radio, and his own little radio station there that he runs. So we've been joined by Mike Gray from Parlay.
Hello.
Which is the hottest new show on the air. Good old Parlay. Now, Mike Gray, let me ask you a question. Because we've had some discussions about exactly what does parlay mean. But now, exactly how is parlay spelled, Mike? That's no expression.
It's all interpretive, isn't it? I mean, you spell knife with a K, and so.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
There you go. I'll take the knife out of Mike's back.
But in my opinion, yes, exactly.
Because I love Mike, but I'm passively aggressive to my good friend Mike.
Yes, he's very passively aggressive.
But but honestly, people should hear me and Mike off the air because he's so much more funnier off the air. Mike, you should consider taking your show off the air, and not doing your show, yes, and just talking off the air to people.
It's just a hobby for me, and it's a way to contact people without being considered a stalker.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay.
I've been trying to look up to get a hold of Randy Quaid. Have you seen Randy Quaid's new Gawker? He released, remember that video I sent you of him putting a Rupert Murdoch mask on, and he goes behind his Evie, his wife or girlfriend or whatever she is, and he, I thought that was a joke. I thought that was like, apparently that was real.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because in the Gawker tapes, they're really, getting it on.
Well, this is a family show.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to.
We're not going to go down that road. But Mike, Parlay, where can we find Parlay and listen to your show live?
It's on CJ Mars Radio.
Okay.
And it's on Thursdays at 8 o'clock. And the next week's show is going to be this big Sandy Hook show. I have Wolfgang Halbig and Professor James Tracy. That's a 2-hour show, and then after that, 10 o'clock is the late show. We'll be taking calls.
The late show, they call it. Okay.
Yes, it's not the after show. It's called the late show.
Gotcha. Because after show has been copyrighted by.
After show is your domain. You invented it. You created it, and I don't want to step on any toes.
Mike, I appreciate you calling in. We'll take calls if anybody wants to call in and talk about the Franklin cover-up or the Epstein case or any of these things. We'll take a call at 702-605-4894. Or you can Skype in at ed.opperman to cover these kind of topics. So, Mike, what do you think, man? How do you feel after listening to that?
I think it's outrageous. I remember, when I was a kid, I watched that movie Boys Town with Tracy. What's his name?
Mickey Rooney and Spencer Tracy.
And Mickey Rooney, Spencer Tracy. Yeah, and when I was a little kid, I thought, wow, what great people! What a great idea to have a whole town dedicated just to wayward boys. And it's like, well, no, that's kind of a resort. That's where they cherry pick. Yeah. Think about it. What a way to cherry pick certain children. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at the end of the interview.
Right.
And also, people can't forget that Charles Manson came out of Boys Town. You know, he was only there
Yeah.
for a few days, supposedly, because he stole a car and he got out of there. I don't know how much we know about that. Yeah,
Hey, Ed, is it true if you're in federal prison you can't have a beard?
I do not know that. I do not know that. For
Well,
a
you know,
fact.
Jay Weidner, because I'm a big fan of Jay Weidner, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to get him on my show, but he said that you're not allowed to have a beard in federal prison. And remember that Geraldo when Manson was doing that interview with Geraldo?
Yeah.
They were in the same room, and in federal prison, you're not allowed to be in the same that close to a federal prisoner.
Yeah, no, but I don't think Manson's in a federal prison. I think he would be in a state prison. I don't know for a fact, but I can't see
But
why.
for federal crime, right? Or
No, he committed a state crime.
I thought he was in a federal pen.
No, he was convicted by the state of California.
Okay.
So I don't think he would be in any kind of federal prison. I can't see why. But you never know, man. You look at this guy, Henry Vinson, man. They're coming after him with income tax stuff to go after him, you know? Oh,
They get you one way or the other, you know?
Yeah, because for the most part, you know, if you don't pay your taxes, they send you a letter. And you can kind of negotiate your way out of it. Oh, brother. Hey.
Who's on the air with us, Ann or?
Nobody. It's just you and me. We're live on the Awake Radio Network, and we're live on Wolf Spirit, run by JP, and Shazaz Radio, and 1800 Radio, and Sovereigns, Scottish Sovereigns on the Land,
Right.
and a whole bunch of stations there.
Yeah, can I just say something? When you asked the guest about how did Epstein get to be where he is, because he's not a smart guy, and and he said he was a math genius. I've come to the conclusion that people like these billionaires that you think they're so smart, like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and I think they're just front men. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Bill Gates, his parents were like, he had rich parents,
Yeah, but not like he's got like 66. What does he have? Like $66 billion or?
Well, yeah, but because he stole basically. There was another DOS program, and he stole DOS and made it MS DOS and took it over. He just basically stole somebody else's program.
Right.
And had the lawyers and stuff to go in because his parents were big hotshot Harvard lawyers. I can see how that could happen. How you can kind of get in there and scoop things up. I can see that happening.
But I just see people like that as really front men for bigger people.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say, but I don't know, man. What interests me about this guy Epstein is how he got from this high school. How did he become a high school teacher? He didn't have a college education. It's just all very strange. So I don't know.
Maybe he was acquiring boys for top execs at Bear Stearns.
Well, what it said in some of the stuff I read was that he was teaching the children of these Bear Stearns big shots, and he became friends with one of the daughters. Became friendly with one of the daughters, and was what's that called? Tutoring a child of one of these Bear Stearns big shots. And then suddenly, they were so impressed with his passion and all this blah 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 that they brought him into Bear Stearns. But even if you get into Bear Stearns, I know I'm from Staten Island. I know a lot of guys who went to work for these big, Merrill Lynch and Dean Witter, all these places like that. If you get in there, you don't have a college education. You get in there, and even if you know big shots in there, to come out of someplace like Bear Stearns after 6 years, as a semi-billionaire, and then this story about, he only has one client, all this kind of stuff. I don't know. The whole thing to me is really fishy and weird.
Yeah, it's shady.
Yeah, and I'd like to hear more about it and see what's going on there.
And remember that reporter that I can't think of her name that initially did the story, and when she talked to him, everyone was telling her what a genius he was. And after she talked to him, she says, "This guy's not a genius.
Yeah,
he's an idiot. He could barely answer questions."
Right, and if he was a genius, okay, even now today, fine. If he was a genius, why can't he hire a really good press agent and a PR team, to kind of clean things up? And, and then because look at Woody Allen, if this guy's such a genius, why isn't he sharing his genius with us, on the radio or a book, like what? Who's he sharing his genius with? The whole thing's just
You know,
too weird.
you know what Nick Bryant said about will Bill Clinton's affiliation with Epstein hurt our chances? Bill Clinton, does the name Juanita Broderick, wasn't it Juanita Broderick, come up? Remember her?
Yeah, she's dead, right?
Is she? She died?
I don't know.
She's the one that accused Bill Clinton of raping her in Little Rock.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, okay. I thought she was dead.
And he bit her lip, remember?
Right.
And nothing. Nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, who's that girl that's on my Facebook friends? You know?
Paula Jones?
Yeah, Paula Jones. Yeah, she doesn't want to talk about anything anymore. You know?
Yeah.
I says, Paula, come on, let's do something, no, I don't talk about it. You know? And, who knows, man.
Yeah.
But I don't see anybody taking on the Clintons whatsoever, or anybody bringing this stuff up to Hillary. You know, has anybody asked Hillary, "Hey, what's going on? How come Bill was on this plane with these little girls and stuff like that?" No one says anything. You know, which is mind blowing when you think about it.
Well, if you read, I would love to talk to Kathy O'Brien in her book Transformation of America.
Yeah.
She basically says that Hillary Clinton is basically Bill's handler, and that Hillary Clinton was having an affair with actress Markie Post.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that they were like lesbian lovers. That's in the book.
Well, I've tried to get Kathy O'Brien on the show, and a lot of these people, I've tried to get them on the show. They don't get back to me, so who knows what's going on. Who knows? I can only, do what I can, try and come up with the information I can and put it out there.
Did you see Sean Stone, Oliver Stone's son, interviewed Michael Aquino?
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah, I think Sean Stone is into it.
Well, when
and I'll tell you something else. I don't trust. Everyone says Alex. I don't trust Jesse Ventura.
I'm not too thrilled with Jesse Ventura either.
Yeah.
And as far as Alex Stone, Sean Stone.
Sean Stone.
Sean Stone goes. His father created a production company, and they did a total whitewash of the McMartin preschool.
Yeah.
And they formed a production company, and then these McMartin PR guys, I think they were called the Mans or the Manleys.
And who starred in that movie?
James Woods.
James Woods.
Right.
And who was James Wood? Or James Wood is known for. Well, he's obviously all his acting jobs, but he was the one that said he was at Logan Airport in Boston the day before 9/11. That he saw the 9/11 hijackers, that they were prepping.
Well, he also hung out at the OJ trial and went back and met with Lancito.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
The 9/11 connection is this, that he claims that he saw the hijackers like they were doing a run through. Well, if he saw that, why didn't he say something? Why didn't he call the FBI?
He's not the only one
that
says that. The guy from Family Guy, that guy.
There's the connection.
Yeah.
James Woods is all over Family Guy. Him and Seth MacFarlane are friends.
Seth MacFarlane, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, too, what's his name? Paul McCartney says, "Oh, I was supposed to be on that plane." Oh, and I went, "Oh, I was sitting there in the airport, and I missed my plane." So all of them.
Paul McCartney doesn't have his own plane.
No, not everybody has their own plane. No, not everybody has. It's unusual for people to have their own plane. It's not common.
Well, they charter. What they do is they go in groups and charter, they'll buy into a plane, right?
But when you got people like Chris Tucker got his own plane and Donald Trump got his own plane, that's what's suspicious. Because why do you need your own plane? Then you start something weird's going on. John Travolta got his own planes, 747s. This guy Jeffrey Epstein got his own plane. Then there's why? Because you're right, you can form groups and charter, not charter, but kind of like I have a little corporation here with 10 guys own a plane.
Right? They buy in, yeah.
But back to with the whole thing with the McMartin preschool is because now when we were all following that case, Alex Constantine, and when he heard that Oliver Stone was going to do this movie about the McMartin case, and he saw who was involved, he contacted Oliver Stone and said, "Hey man, here's all the details on this, here's all the facts." And Oliver Stone went ahead anyway and went ahead with that movie, which was a total whitewash of the McMartin case. Now, I confronted Sean Stone about this. I called him up, and I says, "Hey, man, what's going on?" I says, your dad did a whitewash, and his response to me was, "Oh, well, yeah, but my dad, he did that movie, that it was about people wrongfully convicted, and he was taking the side of people who could think it wrong. That's the story that he was trying to get out, that sometimes people are wrongly convicted, and I had on my show, I had Douglas Dietrich on my show." And you know about that, and Douglas Dietrich confronted Colonel Aquino, and he had all these accusations. So he sort of like to justify his street credibility by associating himself with Douglas Dietrich. And I told him, listen, I know Douglas Dietrich. I'm friends with Doug Dietrich. Give me a break here.
You ever wonder, like, if Aquino's giving Douglas Dietrich all that information?
I don't know about that, but my point in this is that I was saying to Sean Stone, that, listen, okay, I know all about Doug Dietrich, but what about you and your dad and McMartin? And now, then shortly after that, Dietrich was confronted by Aquino, saying, "Hey, man."
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
right.
Remember
there was a little hullabaloo that went on there, right? And now, what it seems like is that all these people are being confronted by Aquino, and they're giving him a free ride and saying, "Hey, man, come on the show and you give your side of it." But he's not giving it. They're not. He's not giving.
Yeah, they never ask him, like, "Hey, you're all over that book, Transformation of America."
Well, right.
And some of the stuff in that book, she claims, and she actually, you could go on YouTube and see it, she spreads her legs. What she said was he took a stiletto knife, okay, and carved a round face with a nose in the wall of her vagina.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And when I read that, I was like, wow, I wonder what that looks like. Then, I guess a few years ago, she actually went to a doctor's office, and they showed it, and it's there.
Well, that's very interesting, and like I said, if Michael Aquino wants to come on the show and respond to these accusations, okay, fine, I'm open to that. But I'm not going to I'm having on the show and give out PR. Listen, people are out there saying things about this guy. I don't know if it's true or not. Okay, all I know is people are saying this. If he wants to give his side of what they're saying, he can come on the show. He wants to come on my show and do a PR press, what a great guy he is.
Right.
Get lost, I don't even want to talk about,
and he's very congenial, very well spoken, very polite. It's like you wouldn't think he's the monster that,
But the thing is, okay, whether he's a monster or not, if you want to come on the show and say, listen, I'm not a monster, fine. Address the accusations. I'm not going to let somebody on come. If someone's making accusations.
And no one never brings it up. No one ever brings it up.
Give him a free ride.
Yeah.
What is that?
And even I was disappointed. I like Sean David Morton, but
who?
I interviewed him. I even wrote that to Sean in an email. I said, "Why didn't you bring this up? Why didn't you bring that up?" And he goes, "Well, I'll do it the next time I have him on."
If only you had the chance to ask him that. Did you ever ask him that when you were on there with him?
No, I didn't. I should have.
I should have.
I gave him a free pass too.
You gave him a free pass, man. Listen, there's no free passes. Listen. I'm all for giving somebody the opportunity to, if I'm accusing somebody of something, or my guest comes on and accuses somebody of something, I'll give them the opportunity. Anybody out there, my guest says something about you, come on the show and give you a response. Okay, we can record it, we can do it, whatever. I'll give it an equal time. But I'm not going to give you a free ride to come on my show and just promote yourself just because someone else has accusations against you. You have to respond to the accusations. That's what the equal time is, not free rides.
How much time are we going to do today? Because is anyone calling in?
No one's calling in. I got to do another half hour, and no one calls in anymore. No one wants to talk to me. Everybody hates me.
Really? Come on, get out of here.
Yeah, I could. Let's see.
Hey, can I mention something?
Oh no! I gotta no. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you maybe disagree with me a lot, but on these hoaxes, that they're hoaxing things.
Yeah.
And I've come to the conclusion that they're hoaxing the lottery, the state lotteries.
Right.
And the mega. I'm not talking about the pick 3 or 4 or even the 5 where you make 75,000. Okay.
Right.
Because you always see 2 or 3 winners there. I'm talking the big ones, the big boys. Okay. Now, right here, you could look at Shaw McBride. Go on YouTube, look up Shaw McBride. He gave away the entire $318 million fortune. Gave it all away, the entire jackpot.
Okay.
Well, who would do that? I mean, he wouldn't even keep $1 million for himself.
Well, Mike, and I'll tell you this: a lot of your investigations center around, well, why would they react this way? Why would they, behave this way?
Right.
And people do behave and react oddly, and so that's not a factor really, because you have to factor in that the people behave oddly. But I will tell you this, man. Okay, and I think we talked about this off the air, right?
Right.
I was involved in an investigation once where I believe that people did receive lottery money in part of a scam. That there was a reoccurring... that people had inside juice with the lottery and were able to scam somebody out of the lottery system. And I believe that for a fact. And
well, you could see it in the there's one YouTube thing where the number came up 35.
Right.
The ball came up 35. Then it went back up and comes back as 53.
Well, yeah, okay. I don't know about that. About
yeah,
YouTube
no,
videos.
it's you could say for yourself.
Okay, I don't know about YouTube videos or whatever, but I can say that I had a real, investigation with real stuff where people. Were,
so what do you make of that? So who was fixing it? Then?
I don't know.
People within the lottery system.
Yes, people within the lottery system, just like at OTB and stuff like that, and the racetrack is right. Races are fixed, and I'm sure the lottery gets fixed all over the place. Different, and it's like happens all over the place. And in casinos, there's all kinds of listen. Everyone's trying to get away with something. It happens all over the place. Now, I do have a couple of announcements since we can't play commercials tonight because for some reason it's not working. Okay. Which how ironic is that? But the ads are not playing. I know. Sorry, Mike Gray from InfinityHomePlans.com.
No, it's no big deal.
But we'll play it. It was a big show tonight. But we'll have it on YouTube. It'll be up there, and we'll insert it into Spreaker as well. But I got some big stuff going on that people might be interested in. And one thing is that I did an audition.
How'd that go?
It went very good, man. I auditioned for a reality TV show, which is basically the same thing as we're doing here on the radio. I almost kind of suspect that maybe they've listened to the show and then decided to do a TV show about it. And then by coincidence, I applied for the show, and now they're all excited, to talk to me and have me on here. And I'm doing a second audition, a Skype audition on Monday or Tuesday with the producers and stuff like that. So they love me, they love my credentials, and it's going to be the same kind of thing that we're doing here now, where we're going to be investigating recent historical iconic events and either debunking them or coming up with conspiracies or theories or whatever, just like we do here on our show.
Is this local? Are you going to travel?
No, we'll be traveling. Yeah, this is real.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, This is a big deal. They have the production company has shows on MTV. They have a History Channel. They've done other shows like this, but more historically, not the Discovery Channel. All these different. They have a bunch of shows all over the place.
Now, how will this affect the show, the Opperman Report?
Well, first I have to change the name of this show to Parlay 2.
Oh my goodness!
I'm gonna call this show Parlay 2. Okay, and
parlay, a discussion in terms. That's all.
Okay, good luck with that. But the thing is that I'm going to make sure I'm not going to take the deal if it's going to affect the show. But this is the kind of thing where we can get funding in to do this show, and I'm not going to have any kind of. Well, I can't really say that yet, but I don't expect to have any kind of creative control
over the show,
right over the TV thing. No, not like I have here. Yeah. For sure. But we'll have money and we'll have exposure that we can build up what we're doing here now. And definitely the radio show will have 10 times the listeners right off the bat the second week, because
have they talked to you about traveling and like how much traveling will you be doing? How long will you be away?
Well, there will be travel involved, but the thing is, I'm also working on. I'm doing a whole bunch of shows off the air. I'm recording shows almost every day now.
Right.
And we're going to be doing a whole big series of interviews about Ted Gunderson, and we're going to edit them all together. I'm doing a show tomorrow about I Don't Like Mondays, San Diego shooter, 1979. This girl, I think her name was Brenda Spencer, who shot these kids. She was the first school shooter in 1979. She was a girl who did this, and the Boomtown Rats wrote the song.
And that's
about
Geldof that did that song, right? And his daughter died not too long ago.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, a lot of weird, interesting stuff about that.
Because she was exposing stuff. That's what they say.
Who knows? We don't know. You know, we'll see, right? And I'm hoping to get her and talk to her in prison as well, and then we'll add it to this interview. A lot of stuff. I'm contacting a lot of people I want to interview are in prison. By the way, if anybody wants to volunteer and help me write letters to these people in prison and get a hold of them and get them on the show, and I'm looking for always volunteers and stuff like that. We're always looking for donations, guys. You know how desperate things are over here. We always need your donations to keep the show going, to keep me afloat, and to keep me running. We face a lot of opposition and a lot of sabotage and a lot of infiltration every single week. You have no idea what goes on behind the scenes here. And so we definitely need your support, you know. We have good guys like Mike Ray and Amanda from Pacific West Bamboo and other people that donate and try and help out. But we really need support to keep things going here and to keep things afloat, because we face opposition every single day. Even my interview tonight with Nick Bryant, you know, I wasn't as prepared as I would have liked to have been. Because of so much distraction that went on during this week and went on all day today, just dealing with technical problems when we should be able to focus on the content and the interview. I wasn't too happy with tonight's interview. What did you think, Mike?
No, I liked it. Am I correct? Did he say Larry King or Lawrence King is working at a car dealership in Virginia?
Yeah, I said that. Yeah, he's working at a BMW dealership, but he's also on the board of another children's kids at risk.
Oh, my God. Could you imagine?
Dude, can you imagine? That's right.
I mean, why can't people... Oh, my God. That's amazing. That's amazing. He should be not anywhere around children at all. Just, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, what kind of board would put him, you know, what kind of organization?
Well, you know, we should really find out exactly where he works and send letters and send, you know... send information to his employers and boycott it.
You don't think the employers know? You know? Of course they do.
That's amazing. See, he's juiced. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. In other words, he's been told, no matter what you do, you're going to have a job. Just keep your mouth shut.
Right.
You know, it's probably a no-show job too. You see?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you know, but to get on these boards and stuff like that. Yeah, well, that's what happens, man. That's what's going on out there. So, you know, and very few people are up to the job of fighting back against this stuff. You know, I can remember listening to John Gotti, you know, before they arrested him. And he says, they had him on the FBI wiretaps. And he says, you know, man, listen, 10 years from now, I'm either going to be dead or in prison. That's the life I've chosen. That's what's going to happen, you know. And that's where we're going. You know, so if
well, you think about our good old FBI, okay? Yeah. They cut a deal with Sammy the Bull Gravano, okay, to get Gotti. Yeah. Now, Sammy the Bull Gravano killed, admittedly, 19 people. And they put him in a witness protection program somewhere in Arizona.
Yeah.
Just to get Gotti. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, Gotti was the big headline, and I think Gotti killed like 30 people. So you know, and gave the orders to kill all these people. You know, and
right.
Yeah, I know, man. Listen, the whole deal with people making deals with the cops. If people had any idea what really goes on with that kind of stuff, because you can make deals with the cops, especially in these narcotics cases. If you get busted with, let's say, $100,000 worth of drugs, and you know, there's another $100,000 in cash, to get out of that case, all you have to do is make 3 times the money back to the DEA. So all you got to do is call you up and say, "Hey, Mike, man, meet me over at the diner. I want to talk to you about a deal." I bring a suitcase with $300,000 in it. You and me are sitting there, we talk, chat back and forth, blah, 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 blah. The cops come rushing, blah, you're under arrest, right? Okay. They take you down, okay? They confiscate the $300,000. There's no case against you. That case is dropped.
Really?
Oh yeah. What case do we have?
You want to hear something funny?
Yeah.
When I had my office in Kissimmee, this guy named George, real nice guy, Spanish guy.
I know.
He would no, you know, he would come to my office. He came from New York. He used to own a nightclub, and he got into the construction business.
Uh-huh.
And he was frazzled, you know. And he was always behind the eight ball kind of thing, you know. So I gave him some prints, and you know, we started building. Because the next time he came in, he was a real nice guy, family guy. The next time his friends come in who had been with him, I said, "Hey, where's George?" Right? Hadn't seen him in a long time, and they look at each other, and they go, "Oh yeah, George is there." Yeah. So then they didn't say anything. I did business with them. Okay, they leave. They come back a couple months later to do another print with me, and I go, "Hey, by the way, where's George?" And again, they look at each other, and they go, "George got busted. He had 2 keys of coke. I guess he was behind, on his bills, and he got." They said 30 years for 2 keys of coke.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it, and I mean, you know, he had 4 kids. You know, I was like, oh my God, you know, that's crazy.
Dude, that's nothing. I know guys that got set up, 15, 20 pounds of pot, and they got 15 years. You know?
See, that's why I think at the very least, drugs should be decriminalized.
But then again, but you understand the way it works is just like I'm explaining to you. These guys buy their way out of these cases. This is what these DEA agents live on. They're driving around in these fancy cars. They got brand new cars they're driving around that they seize from people, dealing drugs, or just getting pulled over, or they're just seizing money. Period. If there's no drugs, the dogs hit on your money. We're taking your money, and that's it. It's all happening all day long.
Yeah, it's criminal.
Yeah, it is. You gonna do any shows about that?
Maybe. I don't know. That's really my purview. I think that's a show for you. You do.
Yeah, no, you know what? I should.
Yeah.
I was just contacted today by
like Fast and Furious.
There you go.
That'd be an interesting thing.
We're just contacted today by a guy. I haven't had a chance to talk to him, but his son's murder was covered up by the cops, and so he wants to get that some publicity and stuff like that. So there's all these cases out there, man.
Hey, did you see that? You saw that video, right, about the Gelman one?
Yeah.
What'd you think about that?
I think it is I've heard of other cases where people are under surveillance, and the police were aware of them committing crimes, and even too, by the way, in these drug cases, like what I was telling you before, where you and me can set up a deal, and buy my way out of the case. When you get, almost everybody at these high levels of these cases, okay, they're all working with the DA, drug enforcement. They're all informants, and once you become an informant on that level, you can keep dealing your drugs or keep doing your mafia crimes and stuff like that. And if you get pulled over, you have the business cards of these cops. They come and they get you out of it. You get pulled over.
Right.
I'm working. Yeah.
When I first saw that interview, I thought, this guy's crazy. He's nuts. He's paranoid, or schizophrenic or whatever. And then I saw the Eileen Warren's one where she said basically the same thing, that the cops knew what she was doing when she was killing people. And I thought, oh, she's crazy. But then I'm thinking, now that
Oh, did you break up?
the truth.
Oh. What's that last thing you said?
Eileen Warren is?
Yeah.
Because she said the cops knew what she was doing, that she was killing people, and they just let her.
Yeah, and that does happen as well. The cops, homicide detectives or whatever, they're working on a bunch of cases. If you know somebody's out there doing something, you don't have the evidence to bust them yet, and they keep doing it. Yeah, that stuff happens.
Yeah, wow.
That stuff happens. People have no idea what goes on with these investigations with these cops. They lie in police reports. They lie on a stand. And it's just, and they get away with it too, man. Because even the defense attorneys, they pick and choose which cases they really want to fight for, because they're making deals with the DAs and stuff like that, and you got to let some guys go to prison, and there's only a few guys you can negotiate to get out. If they have a big Epstein guy, they're gonna dump 30 guys to go to prison on that to get Epstein off. And they'll betray their own clients. Yeah, it's really tragic. You know, what goes on out there. This is why I was trying to ask Nick Bryant, man, what he thinks about it. Is there any hope, you know, of contacting, you know, Child Protective Services or the cops? And you know, he talks about how, you know, people report these cases and the FBI comes in and they try and shut up the witnesses. That stuff happens, man. You know, man, it sucks. So I don't know. I don't see a good future for us here. Yeah, like even if, you know, we get this TV deal or whatever, I don't see a really good future for even with that. You know, I don't know, but
everything's been flipped. Everything's been turned upside down.
Yeah.
It used to be the corruption was if there was corruption, let's say someone was caught, they were dealt with immediately because they didn't want the system to break down. They wanted to have at least the appearance of everything being above board. And now it's almost like, you know, we're in the bizarro world where, you know, yeah.
But even still, when are you talking about? Because J. Edgar Hoover, man, there's all kinds of evidence about him, man. Everybody.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was blackmailing everybody. He's all, you know, letting people go, hanging out with organized crime figures, gambling, you know, horse track, you know, the whole thing. Again, the whole thing.
The whole time while he's saying publicly there is no organized crime, but yet he knows there is, and he's affiliated with them, and you know.
Yeah.
Kibitzing with them, sure, yeah.
Kibitzing, that's what I was going to say.
Kibitzing, yeah.
You might say he was parlaying with them.
He was parlaying with the mafia.
Yes, he was.
But there is no mafia.
No, that's.
And I will kill you if you say there is. Did you ever see that graffiti in New York?
Well, I grew up on Staten Island, and
did you ever see like there's a big graffiti? There is no mafia, and I will kill you if you say there is.
I never saw that, but when growing up, you know, that's what we had to say. There's no mafia, you know. And
yeah, there is no organized crime. Come on, come on. You know, I was from Hoboken. I had no idea that the DiCavalenti family, was out of Hoboken, New Jersey. I never knew it. I never heard of him, you know.
And those are the Soprano guys.
That's what's based off the Sopranos, yeah. And if you ever read, that's why I was. He's dead now. He died not too long ago. The guy, I think his name is Philip Marco. I think he wrote the book of the Iceman, the Richard Kuklinski story. That book, a lot of the scenes are in Hoboken and Jersey City. You know, I was like, holy cow. You know, from the 50s and 60s and.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, that whole Calavanti family there. It's really interesting stuff with that bunch.
Yeah. And the Westies, the Irish mob.
Yeah.
You know, out of Hell's Kitchen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Now, when I was, you know, bopping around New York City, you know, you dealt with everybody, you know. Certain motorcycle gangs. You can't mention their names. You know, all kinds of, you know, I had a nightclub in Manhattan, you know. It wasn't a joke, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all that stuff is real, you know, especially back in those days, back in the 80s, man. All that stuff is real, you know. And these guys hobnob with high-level people, you know. Names we mentioned earlier tonight. You know, they're all out there doing stuff, man. It's just, I don't know, man. So, and it just seems
who's the guy that wrote Slaughterhouse 5? I can't think of his name.
Vonnegut?
Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut, is it?
I think so.
Yeah, they asked him before he died, you know, you have any advice? You know, what advice could you give to the, you know, the kids of the world? And he said, yeah, join a gang.
It's true. You know, because it seems like it's an easier road, you know.
Yeah, to start, yeah.
To go down with, you know.
For protection, yeah.
No, it's an easier road to be with the criminals than it is to exposing.
No. Well, I guess he was trying to say is, you know, start a gang or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Have a clan or a tribe. This way you got protection, sort of. Because if you're just an individual, what chance do you have, you know?
Yeah, but I'll tell you something else too. It's a whole nother headache. To keep keeping those kind of guys in line and keep and having those guys around and expecting them. It's really hard to get them to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, they got their own little side thing, side projects going.
And they're just not reliable employees. Is the problem with a lot of those kind of people. It's a headache. Life's a headache, man. That's all I'm going to say.
So does this gig have a per diem? Do you have like a...
We have not talked money yet. But there's definitely money there, no doubt about that.
Right. Is there a time limit, what they're talking about, or?
Well, no. When you do these kind of things, the first step would be, okay, we want you. Now let's talk about the money, and what the time, stuff, and then I'll tell them, I need Friday nights to do the show live,
Right.
And if they want me to, it's a lot of it depends on what they want me to do. If they want me to really investigate this stuff for them for real, I'm charging them real rates. I'm not doing this crap for free.
Exactly, yeah.
But it should be interesting, and it would be great. Wouldn't it be great if we could really get a real production company to really fund real investigations into these real things? That would be wonderful.
Well, what happened to the, what was that thing? Not GoFundMe. Was it the GoFundMe? Not the GoFundMe.
Yeah, the Truth Funders, yeah.
Truth Funders. Yeah. What happened to that guy?
You know what? We didn't get any donations for Truth Funders at all. And so that's where that thing pretty much fizzled out. I don't think we made any money on that at all, which is a shame. Even with that, it's hard to get that kind of thing going without putting out a press release and doing a press conference and really doing it and really promoting it right. And we're just so busy with so much nonsense and so much opposition that if people had any idea, if people could watch behind the scenes and just see, just to book a guy like Nick Bryant, and
right.
We're supposed to have Henry Vinson on to come on tonight too, and then he was nervous and upset and he didn't want to come on, and just booking people, and people say, oh, how do you book these guests? It's a full-time job booking these guests. And we have a full-time team. We have Ann, we have Keith Davis and Christoph working on stuff, and even Mike Gray, man, helps out today. We had to call him up this afternoon to help me with some stuff. Even, believe it or not, even Mike Gray, who's always there when we need him, for support and stuff like that. So we got a great team. We're looking to get information out to you, and we're really trying as hard as we can. And it would just be so nice if we didn't have to face opposition from people for whatever reasons, try and sabotage us and ruin what we're doing and
right.
Fight us and put up obstacles all the time. We definitely have to do a show about, ever since I've come into this whole alternative media community and all this kind of crap, and all the craziness behind the scenes, people would have no idea how... right before we're about to do a show, we'll have someone calling us up trying to sabotage the show. Before I did the Thomas Sheridan show, we had someone calling up, heckling us, We've had, before we did another show with Mike Blue Hair, people calling up Keith Davis, heckling him, trying to distract us and sabotage us. Chat rooms that don't even, banned from chat rooms on my own show. We can't even go in a chat room, Then other stations complain about, oh, you never come into the chat room. Oh, well, what? Give me a break.
Well, how could you be in a chat room and do the show at the same time? It's like...
You know what? A lot of hosts, man, you'd be surprised. They just sit there staring at the chat room all night. That's all they really do. And the whole show's about this 8 people in the chat room, Listen, who knows, man? Who knows, Mike Gray?
As far as sponsor goes, your show needs a sponsor that's targeted for, like, who could we find? Who could we kind of call or get that has to do with investigations?
I've tried that. I went to colleges that teach criminal justice courses, you know, and I can't get through it. It's a full-time job, man, you know, trying to find who to contact and talk to. You know, you get nothing. You get nowhere. What we really need is right now, the stage where we're at right now, we need, and I got some good core people that really see what we're doing, that are trying to support and trying to help. But we need all these people who email me from Ireland and Scotland and the UK saying, "Oh, a jolly good show." Okay, you guys.
But let me ask you, how many people do you think actually listen to the show?
I know there's a lot of people. I can tell you,
100,000.
Oh, easily 100,000.
Okay.
And
well, imagine if each person gave $1. One measly stinking dollar.
Well, let me stop you right there, because I had a guy give me $1, and PayPal took 60 cents out of it.
Oh, wait, okay, $2.
Yeah, you know, yeah. So if you're gonna send $1, send $2. But listen,
$2, two measly stinking dollars.
No, but even people who send $1, let me tell you this, man, it's encouraging. You know, to get a
buck. Right.
It for my.
It's like, hey, we're with you, Ed. We're with you, man.
Right.
You know, keep it up.
So for that, for emotionally and mentally and psychologically, for me, that's great. But I don't want to see PayPal. You know, PayPal's no friend of ours, guys. Okay, PayPal's run by
Elon Musk.
I can't even talk about it because they'll shut off my PayPal account like they did
last time. No, let's not do that.
It's all run by the same guys who have a cut. They take a cut of every credit card transaction. It's a huge. It's like $90 billion a year, man. It's a huge business, which is a whole other topic, which got me in trouble once before. We don't want to get that road again because I got enough headaches in my life.
You don't mess with the banks, man. Let me tell you, or
Let me tell you something, man. They know my voice. Okay.
Hi, this is Ed Opperman.
No, it's not. I know Ed Opperman's voice. Who are you? What? What do you mean you know my voice? How do you know my voice? You know, and that's what my life is like, man. So, you know, guys, if you're listening to the show, especially if you're listening tonight, we just blew an hour just talking back and forth, guys. If you see what we're trying to do here, please support, man. Please help us out. Let's all fight this fight together. It's great if we can get. You know what? I'm gonna do a TV show. I'm gonna put back into this, okay? Because just like John Gotti said, 10 years from now, I'm either gonna be in prison or I'm gonna be dead. Just like Reverend Pinckney, okay? And that's where we are right now, guys, okay? So if we're not going to get help from them, there's no big angel going to come down and help us out with what we're trying to do here. We need ground roots support to fight this fight, and support people like Nick Bryant, okay? And support people like Jim Rothstein and David Schroeder. You know, we have coming on, and all the people that are bringing information on here, which is no joke, man. We're fighting people like Jeffrey Epstein, a billionaire, you know, and so we're just asking for a couple of buck donations, man, to keep this stuff going and to fight back. That I could focus on this stuff, on investigating stuff, rather than focus on all the bull crap around us. And there's still a lot of stuff in my own life that I could talk about and share with you guys that I'd like to get out there. And hopefully we can get more into that too. Because what I'm doing now is almost every single day, I'm recording interviews and we're stockpiling content that we're just going to unleash in the future. And that's the plan right now, just to get as much stuff as we can in the can, and launch it in the future. On some other kind of platform that we have more control over, you know, that I don't have to look around and watch on my back while we're producing a show and all kinds of crap that goes on. You have no idea. But I would like to thank JP again one more time for all his help in helping us set up the SAM broadcaster and all the time, even tonight while he was broadcasting live on Revolution Radio. He's filling in with Sean David Morton, filling in for Sean David Morton. And I contacted him while he's live on the air. I said, "Hey, man, can you help me out during the break?" He took his 5-minute break, man. You know, so his own radio station is called everbeyondradio.com. And you can go there and check out his show archives. And he has awesome meditation products, shungite crystal devices, and also come for a Soul Ray reading. Find your purpose and help JP get you there. Journeys with JP, Revolution Radio, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Mondays on Studio B. So I really want to thank JP, man, for coming to my aid tonight and helping me get all this stuff set up. I want to thank Mike Gray, too, from InfinityHomeplans.com. Great guy. He's always there when I need him, and I can't thank you enough, Mike.
Thank you, Ed.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
Appreciate that, buddy.
Mike of Parlay.
Parlay.
Mike.
The big shows next week, Ed. The 26th, Sandy Hook. Wolfgang Halbig and Professor James Tracy. Real good interviews.
And
I sent it to you. What'd you think? Did you listen?
I listened
Not
to
yet.
it the first time you sent it to me. I listened to it, but today I'm busy. But Mike, do you, when you have Wolfgang on there, do you guys discuss how to spell parlay?
No, they never criticized me for that.
Well, Mike, how do you spell parlay?
I think it's Parley.
Oh my God! All right, now that's it. Now we have this down on record. It's on tape. Mike Gray does not know how to spell the name of his own show. It's
that's how I spell it.
You spell it, but oh my God! Okay,
Is it? I don't know.
it's Parlay.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Oh, I'm screwed.
Okay, right. So you don't know what it means. You don't know how to spell it. Okay, now Mike. Listen, I don't know what to say at this point. I love you, Mike, but I don't think you can call in anymore. Okay.
No, it's Parley. That's how it's spelled.
Have you Googled it?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe Google's wrong. Who knows?
Parley. If I'm wrong, I'll eat my hat. Oh, there is a word. Oh my! You're right, man. I've been Googling parlay, Parlay. So you're right. There is a word named parlay,
And it's a discussion in terms.
and it's called parlay. You're right.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike Gray, I have to apologize to you. What I'm wrong.
Finally, I get an apology from Ed Opperman.
Now, let me tell you something. Okay. When I'm wrong, I'll admit it.
All right.
Yeah,
that's-
right.
Where's Victoria?
Oh, Vic's, she's having a pool party tomorrow, so she's getting
So
things.
what's this? You're cleaning your carpets, or?
Yeah, carpets, cleaning
I
the
used to
house.
clean carpets for a living
Did you really?
for 3 or 4 months for my stepfather. Yeah, I did it.
Do you know that I made some? We only got a couple of minutes left, but do you know that I made homemade carpet shampoo?
How'd you do that? Yeah, with either Windex or Tide or some kind of laundry
A
detergent.
little bit of Tide. Yep, I got the
Yep.
formula right here. It works very, very good.
Yep.
You did that too?
Yeah, sure. We made our own.
See that, man?
You take a little, any laundry detergent, you just put it in the water, and yeah, that's it.
Well, there's another.
That's a special formula. And then they had an enzyme spray that you could spray on the carpet for, and that would loosen up the dirt before, yeah.
Okay, the formula that I looked up online, and it's so freaking cheap, it's not even funny. It's like a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of Tide, and then you go to the dollar store and you buy that awesome cleaner. It's $1 for that. Use a 1/4 cup of that, and then some OxyClean. Again, dollar store, $1. You use a little
Right, yeah.
1 scoop of that, and the rest is water. And you can add Downy fabric softener too, and make the house smell great. And I tell you, the carpets look great, and so I'm very excited about this. And I'm looking forward to next week's show when I'm going to do my windows. And I'm going to talk about my windows next week. And
Wow.
then the toilets for my grand finale show. And then after that, I'm leaving the country. Okay. And I'm never coming back. Listen, guys, we had a lot of big shows coming up. Down to the last couple of minutes, we're going to say goodnight to the Awake Radio Network and 1800s and Shizaz and all these guys. And to Wolf Spirit Radio from good old JP. Next week coming up is either the Princess Di show or the Dean Henderson show about Hugo Chavez. Got a lot of big shows coming up, man. And Neil Sanders about mind control. And, oh boy, all kinds of stuff. And we got to be careful about mentioning too many shows because a lot of other hosts start stealing our.
Yeah. Neil Sanders, Dean, what was his name? Dean what?
Dean Henderson.
How do I get a hold of him?
You can't. Because the first thing I do when I book these guests is I tell them if anyone calls from Parlay to let me know immediately so we can shut you down. All right, guys.
Okay.
Good night. We love you all. I'm gonna drop all you guys off the server here. You have to be on your own after this because I'm hanging up. So if you're
All
over there
right.
in the Awake handoff room, be sure to pick this up because I'm about to hang up. Let me see. How do I do